Whew.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our public meeting of May 26th. And I'm going to start off by just reminding everybody that as per policy 1204, bylaws of the board, the regular meeting of the Board of Education will be recorded and may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board also reserves the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting choose to not stream live or archive a meeting or portion thereof. With that, I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie-Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. And just before we move on to the next item of business, I'd like to just make some introductions. We do have partner groups who are joining us on our Teams meeting. So I'd like to introduce them and my fellow trustees. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Megan Dykeman, I'm chair. We have Vice Chair David Todd, Trustee Shelley Coburn, Trustee Suzanne Perot, Trustee Rod Ross, Trustee Tony Ward, and Trustee Marnie Wilson in attendance. And our staff present tonight include Superintendent Gord Stewart, Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley, Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Mal Gill. We have Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chand. We have Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, Director of Learning Support Services Michael Morgan. We have Director of Instruction Don Tomlinson. We have our District Principal Ron Stair, Communications Manager Joanne Abshire. We have our Executive Assistant Judy Swanson. Technical Support Specialist, Paul Babeo. We have also our partner groups joining us. We have QP 1851 President Cheryl Barnum. We have our LTA President, Tanya Kerr. We have our LTA Vice President, Graham Esplin. We have our LTA Vice President, Darren Storsley. DPAC President, Alicia Rempel. And congratulations, Alicia. I know you held your elections recently. We're looking forward to continuing working with you. And we also have our Langley Principal and Vice Principal Association President, John Cusack. And I believe that is everyone. If I have missed anyone, I apologize as I can't see you all, but I'm going off RSVPs. So with that, we are going to get our report from in camera. Vice Chair Todd.
Thank you. In camera, we talked about personnel today.
Wonderful, thank you. And the next item is our consent agenda. Could I please get a mover that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as provided? And for those viewing at home, just a reminder that because of the forum that we are conducting our meetings, we will be voting in the negative. So as a result of that, we will not be able to have everybody do a show of hands. I will ask if there's anybody opposed to the motion. And I do have a question from Trustee Coburn about the consent agenda, and I do have a mover for the consent agenda. So Trustee Coburn, you have a question about the consent agenda.
Yeah, I do. Just for clarification, and bear with me, I can't find my glasses, so it's going to be a slow read. So it says on item 4, it's the regular in-camera meeting, or the regular public meeting. So Trustee Marnie Wilson requested that item 4.1, consideration of minutes, be removed from the consent agenda, recommendation number, that's all fine. And then the next thing it says, Trustee Marnie Wilson questioned items 11.1, election of the vice chair, and it goes over that, but it gives a recommendation number, which is fine, R20042102, moved by Trustee Wilson, seconded by Trustee Ross. And so I'm just concerned, or I'm confused, or looking for clarification as what one was the recommendation, because I don't seem to recall a recommendation coming out of the first part, so I can't discern them. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, and actually one that I asked myself when we first moved to eScribe. So every item that gets loaded on eScribe has like a recommendation number associated with it, okay, even if there isn't a recommendation, because that's how it formats the agenda. Secretary Treasurer, do you want to elaborate more on that? Because I know I had the same question to you a while ago. every item does that, regardless of whether there's a recommendation or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to pull up the agenda, sorry.
May I follow up with?
Sure, if it's a question to the consent agenda, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just to clarify, so maybe you guys can answer me. I'm just wondering which one was the recommendation, or if we should note that one wasn't a recommendation, because the way I read it, they both look like recommendations, but I don't remember you putting forward a recommendation. So I don't know if it's accurately reflecting what happened in the meeting. And I would just think, I might be alone, but I think clarification as where the recommendation was. And
yeah. So when I raised it, I raised the same concern. And it's a formatting issue with eScribe. So because the item was pulled and went down to the regular agenda, it generates then a recommendation that you're going to adopt those minutes, but later on.
Oh, okay.
Where earlier it was a recommendation to adopt the consent agenda because a subsequent thing happened, because a consent agenda has to be unanimous. Then a new thing is adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, because it is confusing, and I do hope that eScribe's able to fix that.
Right, thank you.
Are you asking about the one that is recommendation 02 at the end, Shelley?
Yeah.
Because that is the recommendation to adopt the minutes, which got pulled out from consent agenda.
May I follow?
Yeah.
I see that. It looked like both were recommendations. So I understand that this is how eScribe is recording it. I just thought, for our own clarity and for our own historical records as a board, that there was no recommendation in our kind of world about us accepting anything, even though eScribe is doing it this way. It almost looks like there was a recommendation received, and we see recommendations as motions, and I just want it to be like accurate. So we've had the conversation, and it makes perfect sense. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. So I do have a mover then for the consent agenda. Could I please get a seconder? Anybody like to second the consent agenda? Seconded by Trustee Wilson. Any opposed to adopting the consent agenda? Any opposed? Last and final call. Any opposition to adopting the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. And we are now going to move on to the next item, which is consideration of the agenda. Could I please get a mover for the agenda? Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Ward. Any changes in order, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda, any opposed, please state your opposition. Any opposed to adopting the agenda, second call. Any opposed to adopting the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. So we are now going on to the Secretary Treasurer's report, item 6.1. Over to you, Secretary Treasurer. We are off to your 2021 annual budget bylaw, first and second reading.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman. As the slides are just being pulled up, did want to preface the presentation with a couple comments. First, I'd like to thank Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chand and his team for the work that they have been doing over the last number of months, getting this budget put together in what is probably the hardest budget this district has had to do since the deficit times nearly 10 years ago. We often joke a little bit with Trustee Ross, his comment about what keeps you up at night. There is a lot in this budget that keeps me up at night right now. And unfortunately, that is something that myself and the superintendent and the leadership team have put a lot of work and thought into in this budget. And we've had to make some very hard decisions. As trustees are aware, we've been operating with a deficit budget structure the last number of years, drawing down our accumulated surplus, and we knew this year we were going to have to get that back in line. What we didn't realize is we would be also doing it at the time of a pandemic. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you'll see tonight that is hard. I will highlight some of the risks that I still see in our budget, and there's numerous ones. The biggest one probably being is our ISP. We have been very conservative in our reduction in that, trying to be more optimistic than some other districts are doing. And we've done that because we wanted to preserve staff. And we have had to reduce positions in this budget. But as we stand right now, we are not having to lay off any staff. We've been able to absorb the changes that we've made with natural attrition and retirements so far. And it looks like we'll be able to do that at this point. And of course, we'll have to reevaluate this come September. Do we have the slide up there, or are we sit still?
We're on legislative authority, Brian.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, thank you. I wasn't able to see it. So I just wanted to remind trustees that we are required by the ministry, by the School Act, to submit an annual budget every June 30th for the next fiscal year in the format that is required by the minister at the time, and that format is the PSAB reporting that we now need to do. You could just advance to the next slide. The annual budget is basically broken down into statements and schedules. The statements are the combined results, and that's what we have to submit to the ministry, is a combination of our operating, special purpose, and capital funds. So the statements are the combination of those two, and the schedules are the details. So like the Schedule 2 is where we'll spend most of the night. That's our operating funds, and that's where the most of our budget is. The next slide, if you don't mind. Budget assumptions, just some high-level things before we get into the details. Our enrollment has increased. We've increased from 20,890 FTE to 21,169 FTE. As I mentioned earlier, we've reduced our ISP projections about 25% from 990 to 750. Some districts have done that a lot more aggressively than us. There's a few reasons why we have not done so. We have a lot of students that are returning students, and we have a program in Langley where our ISP students come here to graduate, not just for an experience where they come for a year or half a year. The information from our ISP coordinator department right now is that we have about 540 returning students that have paid already for next year, and they have the right paperwork and permits. We have another 35 or so that are returning but need an updating to their permit. And currently we have a mixture of 304. Some of those have paid, not all of them have paid, that have applied to come for September. So if you look at all those that are looking to come to Langley, we're about 875 students. We're not sure how many of those will actually be able to come. But with us opening in June, that has been seen as a positive indicator for international students. So we have been a little more conservative. We also, as a semester, have a couple semester schools, which also allow us to take intake later in the year. So that's something that might also help us to preserve that. That is a number that has myself and the superintendent concerned, because we have been conservative on that. But we do want to see what shows up in September before we made any more decisions on have to be forced to make any more drastic cuts. Our average teacher cost is up $803 and it's now at $96,442. In this budget, we've included raises for our excluded and admin staff, which are not funded. So those are cost pressures that the district has to do, and they are in line with what the teachers and their support staff have been receiving over the last 2 years, or the last agreement. This budget includes the full year impact of the full 1.95% healthcare tax with the conversion from MSP. Trustees may recall the last 2 years, we've been able to take premium holidays for staff in the district on our benefits because of surpluses in those funds. We've now depleted those surpluses in our funds, so we no longer are able to take those premium holidays. So that is a bit of a cost to the district. We've also built in cost benefit increases, which have increased this year. The impact of late start positions, we moved out a lot of the one-time items that we used in the amended budget, and it includes the contract for the QP agreements. We haven't built in the teacher agreement into the budget. We have decided to include that in the amended budget because the funding and the announcement for that came fairly late in the process. We have looked at the funding that is coming and estimated on the cost, and they are fairly close. It looks like if be about $175,000 maybe short, but we're still looking into that as a district, but it is fairly close in what our funding is and to what our estimate at this point in time is. The next slide is a overview of our annual revenues broken down by fund and by the funder of those sources of income. You can see we're anticipating revenue of just under $155 million. The bulk of that being our operating funding, $211 million of that. And you can see the bulk of our operating funding is funded from the ministry, followed by our tuition, which is mostly our international program. And I will go through more on those in a moment. On the next slide, you can see corresponding the expenses broken down by fund. And once again, the bulk is in our operating fund, and in operating, the bulk of our funds are spent on instruction. On the next slide, this is the bylaw amount that we will be asking trustees to be considering tonight. So we will be looking for a bylaw to pass for just over $261 million for the 2021 school year. Going into more on the operating, where we'll spend most of our time. The revenue, I've broken it out here for you. I won't go into a lot of details because there is detailed slides on the first four items. So I'm just going to talk to the investment income at this point. As you can see, we've taken that down about $400,000, which is probably still a conservative reduction based on what interest rates have done during the COVID period. The overnight rate went from 1.25% to 0.25%, so it went by a fifth. We are trying to offset some of those by putting more funds into the central deposit through the ministry, because we do get a better rate from that. That rate only went in half, so it went from just under 3% to just under 1.5%. So we have moved more funds in there. It will require us to be managing our funds a little closer and to make sure that we are okay, but it'll provide some security on that. But that's one we'll have to look at as time goes on with what happens with interest rates. On the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit of what the ministry has done with the funding announcement that was given to us just before spring break. They've basically taken all the collective agreements and a few other funds and have combined them into the operating grant, and just wanted to show kind of where those funds have gone. You can see on the slide here that most of the categories for the operating grant were in the just little over 1%, except for our Indigenous students. That increased by 3.4%, so that's a larger increase than the others. Similar to last year, they've moved more money into that category. It does create pressures for the district because those are targeted funds. So they have moved some of the contract money into targeted funds. So that has put a little more pressure on the district for that. On the next slide is the unique geographic factors. And you can see at the bottom there that those have gone up by almost 9%. But what I wanted to highlight is the ones highlighted in orange there, you can see are ones that this district are not eligible for. So some of the larger increases we aren't eligible for as a district. The climate factor has gone up, which we are eligible for, but that is partially offset because they've taken our carbon rebate and rolled it into that factor. So we did receive more money there, but we also lost an offsetting grant for that. So similar to last year, there has been a shift in some of how the ministry has allocated funds to the districts. On the next slide, as I've shared with trustees before, the districts in the metro area at least have put together a similar for each of their districts on what we had anticipated would be our funding for the year and what that actually is when we received our grants. You can see that our operating grant was $385,000 less than what we anticipated based on the grants and the growth that were rolled into the operating grant. In addition to that, the classroom enhancement fund, the overhead component, was reduced by all districts by about 10%. So that was about another $110,000. So with the funding announcement changes, had a negative impact on this district by just under $500,000. On the next slide, you can see where some of those changes have happened. You can see the enrollment-based funding and unique student needs have increased, but you can also see their ministry grants. There's the carbon tax, which has been rolled into the funding envelope, the healthcare employer health tax, and the QP settlement. Those are the amounts that had been rolled into the per pupil amounts and the unique geographic factors. They have created a new category, unique opportunity, equity opportunity supplement. There was no new funding for that. It was part of the reallocation of those funds that went in there. So that $580,000 was already included in what we feel is a shortfall of about $500,000. Overall, you can see that our revenue is up just under $3.2 million. The next slide shows a little bit, we'll go through each of the bigger categories like I mentioned before. The tuition one, the big impact is our ISP program. I spoke to that a little bit. We've taken that down by 240 students. And also the summer session programming for international students is no longer being done. That is a program that prior to COVID was going to end this year, as it wasn't drawing long-term students in the way that we had hoped that they would be doing so. So that is something that had been anticipated to be removed this year prior to COVID, but the reduction in students is definitely COVID related. The next slide shows our other revenue. The big change here is we have put $300,000 for transportation. We are in the process of changing how we deal with our courtesy riders and charging for that, and also potential route reductions if we don't have as many courtesy riders. So instead of trying to guess at the split for now, we've just put in a $300,000 in revenue. That may look different if we have people that aren't taking the courtesy and paying the fee, and would be offset then by reductions in costs. So we'll true up that number when we do the amended budget once we have a better understanding how many riders are paying the fees and how many have chosen not to take transportation, which would reduce our operating costs. The next slide is the breakdown of our operating expenses, and we'll go through in more detail all these categories in subsequent slides. You can see the biggest increase is in our teacher category and in our benefits. The next is a comparison, just for reference sake, for trustees. Of the pie chart on the left is the proposed operating budget for the 2021 year, and on the right is the amended budget amount averages for the province. So it's not a complete apples to apples, because obviously we don't know what all the other districts' budgets are, but it gives trustees an idea. You can see that we are averaging 84% in instruction, whereas the province is 82.8. So we're higher on instruction, and then we are lower in areas like transportation, maintenance, and a little bit lower on district admin. So as we go through At least it gives you a bit of a perspective as to how we compare against a provincial average as we go through some of these changes. The next slide is the costs that have changed from our amended budget for the teacher salary costs. One of the bigger ones is the impact of the average teacher cost increase that I mentioned earlier at $735,000. This year we have we usually put a contingency amount in our average teacher cost. This year we decided to put it in as an amount at the district level instead of on the teacher cost level, and so we did a contingency of $500,000 for that. The $403,000 is the salary component. On the benefit slide, you'll see the remainder of that. We've put in the impact of the late starts we had last year, so that's $322,000. Because of our growth, we've added 3 divisions at elementary and 5 divisions at middle school. And as we are building grids we decided to we usually put in a contingency of about 4 divisions to start the year, because there's always kids showing up in slightly different places, and a few kids can cause a division here or there to be added. But this year, due to COVID, we were a little hesitant to push out all the divisions, especially on the Willoughby Slope, until we saw all the growth. So we held back 2 more divisions there. So if we actually hit our projection numbers, that 6 contingency the 2 would go out to the Willoughby Slope, and then we would have to see what we would need for those other remaining 4. So we did that a little bit differently, just to be a little more conservative at this point in time. There was a small resource allocation change for elementary. You can start to see in the next line the impact of ISP, 3.5 bodies. Those are for things that are targeted that we use in our schools for our international programs. So that's coordinator time, ELL time for ISP students, and those kind of things. We've also had to reduce 8.82 FTE in teaching. That's across elementary and secondary. A portion of that also is driven by the international student program, especially at secondary. Last year we put in an estimate that we would have 4 vacant positions somewhere in the district at all times, because we've had, we were still trying to ramp up. We've reduced that down to a half a position vacant at all times, so that's a 3.5 body that we've added back. We've had to make some changes in our central level, so instructional services, we've reduced that by 3 FTE. Learning support services by 1.1. We have some of the staffing coming from schools to a central resource position. We've had to add 2 international teachers for some work with our international program students. And we've removed 2 counselor positions. So a lot of changes in that area. The next slide is our principals and vice principals. As mentioned, we built in a raise for them in line with what the teacher settlement was with a 4 or 5% increase. So that's $525,000 plus the benefits on that. We've reduced a principal at Alder Grove Secondary, and then last year, late in the year, we had added another principal at RE Mountain, so that's the impact of the full year for that. Last year was a leap year, so you'll see in a few of the categories there is some savings because there's less days to be paid out for the various groups. For principals, that was just under $52,000. The next is the slide on decreases in educational assistance. We have the wage increase. We have, as part of the QP agreement, there was a service improvement allocation for the 1260 union that was done in time. So that has been built into the budgets for the SEAs. Schools have reduced some of the library tech hours, and the ISP assistants have obviously been impacted with the less number of students in the international program. I had mentioned the targeted funds for Aboriginal going up, so that was about $105,000 that would be spent in additional support workers. We have had to reduce our SEAs by 25 positions. The savings on the less days for $337,000. And we had a contingency last year that we then rolled out to schools this year, essentially, so of $176,000. For the support staff on the next slide, we have reduced our maintenance by the school request team. If you recall, with surplus funds 2 years ago, we had built a team to go and do some of the school requests of maintenance works for the nice to haves in schools that we weren't able to get to with our staff, and said we would maintain that staffing as long as we could with surplus. Well, with the surplus being dwindled, we've had to remove that team. That is another one that has been done with people leaving, so we have not had to lay off anyone in our maintenance department. The full year impact of late starts for maintenance was about $76,000. There were some minor adjustments in schools for new supervisors and some clerical adjustments, and then the days for the support staff and the wage increase for them of $390,000 as well. The other professionals, we had added a community coordinator. The bulk of that is paid for by a grant that we receive, and this is just the remainder of the full year impact on that. We've removed a exempt homestay coordinator from the international program since we have less students. The savings on the exempt for the less days, and when we put in budget increases last year, the ministry had timelines as to when we could do that in relation to when the last raise was. So not all that was able to be paid out because of the timing. So there's about $83,000 that was left over from the admin and principal wages from last year that weren't actually paid out that doing that because of the time on that. And then the wage increases of $169,000 for our other professionals. On the substitutes, this is one that always looks strange because in the fall we always have our late starts and coverage for vacancies, so that number usually drops. So for this one, we actually showed it also against the preliminary budget last year, so it's more of a comparative because we assume at this point that we will have our full staff contingent throughout the year. And you can see on here the big changes from the amended were in the QP casual replacement and the TTOC vacancies, both of them just over $400,000. On the benefits side, I mentioned the premium holiday that we had taken last year. That was $718,000, so that was a cost to the district. We last year paid a QP arbitration on the MSP of just under $514,000, so that is coming out of the budget for this year. And then the contingency that I mentioned earlier, that's the remaining, that's the benefit portion of the contingency of the $500,000. The divisions that we've had to higher benefits for that. And also last year, if you recall, we went through a process of taking our admin and our excluded positions and putting them on the teacher benefit plan, as we were finally able to provide a comparable benefit plan to what the teachers were receiving. We did not know what that cost was when we did the budget, and we put in an estimate of $150,000. It was only a $60,000 cost to the district. So there's some savings there. And then the benefits on the increases and the other divisions that were added at schools. On the supplies, with the lower revenues, we've also reduced our commissions by just under $300,000. We had a property tax bill for Northeast Latimer, just because of the timing of when we bought that property. We don't normally pay property taxes, but because of the timing in the year that we acquired it, we had bill for that we had to pay, so we won't have that going forward. We have reduced the travel expenses for ISP and some of the Pro-D in our departments. For the 1851, their service improvement allocation is a fund that's set aside that we'll be working with them to do that. So that's set up as an expense item. We've been able to reduce our postage and some machines that we use for our mailroom. And also with the lower numbers of ISP students, it means we have less ISP, MSP payments of just under $94,000. As a district, we've been talking about photocopying reductions, and we've been working on that for a while, and we saw some really good improvement on that prior to COVID kicking in, to the point where we figure that at the district level, because we pay a portion of that at the district level, we can reduce about $100,000 out of that cost. With one of the benefits we are seeing of COVID is the adoption of Teams, which could further drive savings in that category in the subsequent coming years. The summer transportation for ISP, which the summer program, so those expenses have gone, and schools have reduced their busing and field trip funds. Those are ones that usually get added back once they have their surpluses from the prior year. Schools have also reduced in their school budgets for the photocopying savings that they're seeing in their local budgets. And you can see that the school furniture and equipment budgets are down by $159,000. You see a lot of these changes because this is where people spend their late start money and also their surplus from the previous year. We've reduced about $73,000 in our central supplies. For the last 2 years, we've had grants that we've allowed schools to apply for that we've called Action Plan for Learning Grants. This was a fund that we'd set up at a surplus money for $300,000 that we'd spent over 2 years. This is the second year of it. So that has now been completely spent and has been removed for next year. Our NGN, which is the cost that we pay for the network to the ministry, that has gone down again this year. So that's about a $128,000 reduction. And once again, school supply budgets have gone down just over $605,000 with their surpluses and their late starts. Utilities is just up a little bit, $29,000, and some various other things to get to the difference. So with all these things, with the revenue expenses, brings us to a deficit budget of just under $2.4 million. You can see that compared to the amended was 3.7. Trustees will recall, we had hoped to be able to have a deficit that was no worse than half of that when we were talking about gradually drawing down our surplus funds, and we'd actually set up a restricted amount of exactly our deficit amount now, which we had hoped would last us over 2 to 3 years, and we'll be using it all for next year. As part of that, the next slide is the local capital. Most of that is in computer hardware, and that's our equipment replacement and infrastructure. And we have $200,000 that we try to set aside every year for replacement of the white fleet. And as trustees recall, to be able to get us to where we need to be closer to $500,000 per year in costs to replace our white fleet. So we still have some work to do to get to where we need to be to have a good life cycle on our fleet replacement. The slide here shows a surplus status. The amount at June 30th assumes that we would end the year at a $3.7 million deficit, which we will not. We are already ahead of that number by a couple $1 million. And part of the reason why we felt ability to be a little more conservative on some of the reductions is because the ministry has said that we are allowed to carry forward the surpluses. They're looking at the funding this year as more of a 2-year funding. So the idea is that we will finish better than this, and that will be what we will use as potential risk items for international students or for cleaning costs or those kind of things for COVID that may come our way, or for lower rentals. And as you can see, based on this budget, we would need to take that whole $2.4 million that we put there to balance future budgets, to balance this year's budget. And that would leave us, if we had finished with the $3.7 million this year, only $6.5 million compared to the $16 million that was about 3 years ago. So we have been drawing down that surplus, as has been the intent of the board. But unfortunately, COVID has now hit us at a time where we've now taken that down to a place where we probably don't want to take it down any further. The special purpose funds, these are funds that are defined under PSAB as having a defined purpose and a liability to repay them if they're not used for that purpose. And so we have our special purpose budgets. I just have one slide for the revenue on that to show, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next one. Thank you. What our special purpose funds are. You notice that there's not a lot of changes. The Learning Improvement Fund, that's just a small increase in that. Strong Start is just the carry forward from what wasn't spent the previous year. So the 288 is our annual amount. Same with the Official Languages Program and the Community Link. The one that has changed the most is the Classroom Enhancement Fund, and I have a separate slide on that I'll speak to in a moment. And then there were a couple grants that were one-time grants that are no longer there for next year. On the next slide is the CEF funding. The ministry does not fund the remedy in advance of knowing what that is in September. So basically, we have until September 30th to do our best efforts, and then remedy kicks in October 1. And then from what we determine that, we submit that, and then they give us our remedy funding in the December funding announcement. I've already mentioned the overhead. It's down $110,000 because they've reduced all of our district grants for the overhead by 10%. And then the teachers, you can see that that's lower because they only fund 90% of last year's approved amount until we find out what those numbers are in September, and then they do a true up in the December funding announcement. The next steps, we tonight hopefully we'll get the first and second reading of the 2021 budget. Normally we do a budget open house, which normally would have been scheduled for June 2nd. And obviously with the pandemic, that is not able to happen. So we are going to host a virtual open house. This PowerPoint tomorrow will be posted on our website with a form that the public can fill out with either a question box if they have questions, or a comment box if they have comments, and then the feedback from that I will be bringing back to the board at the the June 2nd Finance and Facilities meeting. And then on June 16th, we would hope to have our third and final reading of the budget, and a reminder that part of that process would require the board to restrict that $2.4 million that we had targeted over the next couple of years to be used for balancing the 2021 budget. Last slide I have is just a reminder of the bylaw amount that is before you tonight, and we can leave that on the screen there for you, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you for that very thorough report, Secretary Treasurer. It was wonderful, and appreciate all of the hard work you've put into this. I do have a questions list. Before that, I'll just remind trustees, so what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be doing first reading, and then we're going to do second reading, and then we will be doing the third and final reading at the next meeting. So what I'd like to do before we open questions up is I would like to get a motion on the floor. Then we can start with questions. So if I could start with mover, that the school district number 35 Langley 2021 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $261,626,067 be given first reading. I do have Vice Chair Todd has moved the motion. Could I please get a seconder? And the second will be Trustee Ward. Sorry, he was just a bit faster, Trustee Coburn. Thank you, though, for offering the second. So I'm going to go to the list that I have before me in the chat that I can see. So my first speaker on the list is Trustee Coburn. Hi. And I'll send you live. I just have to scroll down and find you. There we go. Yeah. Let me just send you over here. It's a little, there we go. You're on the screen now.
All right, thank you, Chair, and to the Secretary Treasurer through the Chair. Just a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for your report. You sound drained and exhausted, and I appreciate your hard work. I'm sure the rest of the district does. So here are my here's my question. I'm assuming that given directives from the ministry, such as students and staff will be required to clean and sanitize hands every time they enter the building, that there would be some new capital injected into our operating budgets, and that the guiding principles as laid out by the ministry that we will be ensuring healthy and safe environments. So I'm just wondering when that extra money will be coming from the ministry in order for us to deliver on their directives. And I would just like to follow up real quick. So, and I'm just going to use this one as an example. You mentioned 3.4% of targeted funding to Aboriginal. I'm just wondering where this money comes from, because my reading on this funding is that no new money has been injected. In fact, it looks like we've lost some. So I'm just wondering where that 3.4% is coming from and where all of our fund is coming from to keep our staff and students safe and healthy.
So I'll do the 3.4 Aboriginal funding first. They have taken that from the reallocated grants that they've moved into the operating block, and also the collective agreements that are now funded in our operating grant. There is no new funding for that, so it basically comes, the district needs to then find funding to offset that in our other operating expenses, because it is a targeted fund and has to be spent on Aboriginal and initiatives, and it is amounts that we have to spend there. So it does put pressure in other areas. As for the cleaning for the costs in the COVID, there has been no funding for that. The district has saved funds in other areas because of the fact that we've had the shutdown of schools for a number of months. And even with the startup now, we will probably end up saving more money than spending this fiscal year. For me, the important part was that they have committed that there is no intent to remove any of those surpluses that are generated from that. That will be used for some of the risks that we do see as a district. So for this year, it's fine. I think it's going to come down to what happens in September, and what the situation we're in and what our requirements are for cleaning and for those kind of things. But those are unknowns for us at this point.
Trustee Coburn, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So I have next Trustee Wilson, so let me just send Trustee Wilson live here. All right, you are live now.
Great. So I want to thank Secretary Treasurer Isley and everybody else who's worked on this budget. I know it's been very tough. I just have a question to clarify. I know you talked about there was staff reductions coming, and I was trying to add as you were talking. And do you have a total? I know I saw 25 SCAs, 2 counselors, 6 maintenance, I think 8 teachers, but I can't be sure. Is there a grand total of how many staff will be reduced by for next year?
I'd have to go and add it up. I don't have that off the top of my head, no. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wilson, does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes.
Generally, do you have a follow-up on that? Is what I should be asking. No, okay. So now I have next on my list, sorry, everyone at home, it takes me just a second to scroll here. I'm going to go to Trustee Ross next.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So typical question is what brings stress to your life, but what storm clouds do you see in the next year that the public probably do not see? Brian?
Well, COVID, obviously. It is the biggest unknown for this district and all districts and, well, for the whole province and the country and the world. It could have impact on all kinds of things for this district. We've talked about ISP. It could have a big impact on that. It could have an impact on our daycare revenue. We rent schools out normally. Right now, we're not able to do that. So we still have $300,000 in school rentals for, church groups and birthday parties and all those kind of things that the community uses for. Right now, we're not able to do that. We could have an impact on our enrollment projections. The economy is definitely impacted by this, and whether or not we get the number of kids moving in that we anticipated. When we did our enrollment projections, we thought they were very conservative. We're not at them. So we have a bit to go to hit those numbers for next year. And it could impact our special needs fund. Like, there's all kinds of things because of the processes that COVID has hit us with. And to Trustee Coburn's point, we don't know what our cleaning and costs to keep things running are, what it looks like in September. So for me, that's the biggest thing. There are far too many unknowns coming at this district to make any secretary treasurer feel comfortable right now. And I know none of my colleagues around the province are feeling very comfortable because there are so many large unknowns, and we will have to weather the storm. We are trying to carry as much surplus as we can into next year to weather some of those storms if they come. And if they don't, then we will use those funds. And I think we've proven that we use those surplus funds and we put it back into the system.
Perfect. If I could just respond to that again, Brian, what are you positive about? We've gone through some pretty stressful times here. When I look at your numbers, you reflected on photocopying. I think we're up 50,000 to the good. I see that as a fairly positive statement that the system is aware that these things cost money. But what do you see as being some of the good things that have come out of this so far?
Photocopying is one. That was an initiative that we had started well before COVID. So that was something that was in the works. And I'm a believer that a lot of good things can come out of bad things. And I think one of the positives that we've experienced as a district is the exponential growth in our tech plan. We've done probably more in the first 3 or 4 weeks coming out of COVID than we could have done in 3 years. Just implementing Teams in the way that this district has taken that on and provided a different way of doing education with kids. And I think some of that's going to stick, and we're going to do things differently. And I think that has been a big positive for this district. We've done a lot of heavy lifting in a very short period of time. And I'll speak on behalf of the superintendent. Both of us are extremely proud of what this district has done in some very difficult times and getting things done to provide education for kids. So, yeah, it's been tough, but we've done some phenomenal things as a district, and I couldn't be prouder.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you. So I need to send Vice Chair Todd. I accidentally skipped over him on the speakers list of the chat. So I'm sending a Vice Chair Todd, and then I've got Trustee Perot And I have a comment, and then I have my second speakers list, which will go Trustee Coburn and then Trustee Wilson. All right, go ahead, Vice Chair Todd.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to say, Brian, first and foremost, a tremendous amount of gratitude for you and your work on this. And I know it's never easy to prepare a budget. And I would say this is not an easy budget in any way, sense, or form. And in the past, I think we did our best to have, for lack of an overused word, we had nice budgets. And this is the beginning of a more difficult, I would say perhaps necessary. I want your perspective on this because I respect you greatly. And that is, when I use the term a balanced budget, I don't mean that it's balanced because we know that we're still in a deficit situation. The analogy I gave before about planned descent, I think we kind of landed and we might have broke the landing gear, but in our descent. But what I'm asking, is it balanced in terms of some of the reductions, the areas where you found cost savings, or do you feel that there may be concerns around this? Because it is, I get that it's necessary. Our ISB numbers are not, that's the great unknown. It looks like about $4 million reduction there. So your perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Trustee Todd. The last couple of years, we haven't really had to make a lot of hard decisions. We've had surplus money that we've been able to do a few things and to not have to make some of those choices that we were going to be forced to make some of them in this budget regardless, not to the extent by any means. COVID has compounded that exponentially. But yeah, we've had to go and look in pretty much everywhere and make some cuts. And it has been difficult, and it's been a long process that the district leadership team has had to work through the system. And I would like to say that I have actually also been extremely impressed with our administrators. They took on a very hard budget process, and they didn't complain. They did the hard work, and they did it not happily, obviously, but they did it in a very supportive way of this district, knowing where we're at. And I fully commend them for the way they've approached it and the support that they've provided to the senior team, and the encouragement that they provided, knowing that this is not something that we take lightly, and that they understood where I was coming from. So I did want to mention that, and I would be remiss if I didn't point that out. So.
Thank you, Brian. So now I have Trustee Perot. I'm just going to send her live now, and then I will remute.
Thank you so kindly. Through the chair to Secretary Treasurer. Firstly, thank you so much for the incredible work you and Shin have worked so diligently on without rest at that, and our staff who are supporting each of you. We can't get through this without you guys, and you guys have been incredible champions for this district during, I hate the word, but unprecedented times on multiple levels, not just COVID. And so I applaud you guys and thank you so much for that. So I just want to acknowledge that first. When we're looking at the budget cuts that we're having to interface with, and we're seeing increase of numbers in the special needs department and having to cut back on SEAs, what steps are we looking to mitigate having students kind of get lost in the shuffle? Because our special needs students, not that we intend it, but you know, earlier we heard a subtle statement that, you know, it may affect our special needs fund. So I just want to understand, how are we going to reorganize the system a little bit to absorb the loss of SEAs in the district, loss of the LSS teachers that we're looking at potentially there? What will that look like, and what could be the potential impacts and implications in the schools?
So maybe I'll
Trustee, should back over to the superintendent. Secretary Treasurer?
I was going to start, and then I was going to ask Michael Morgan if he could step on, as he's in a better position to answer some of the more detailed questions on how we would do this going forward. But to the point on funding, Trustee Perot, my concern on funding is that with COVID, students aren't being able to access doctors right now. So we're not beginning the identifications which come with the funding, and that's a worry for us right now. And we're trying to work through that, but some of that is beyond our control. So once again, like we usually try to project pretty conservative numbers, but we are below that, and Mr. Morgan is working diligently on that and trying to work that process. But I think with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Morgan to talk about how we are doing the new model when it comes to our special ed.
Okay, thank you. You're live now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Trustee Perot, for your question. As we had talked about at the Education Committee meeting, we're really attempting to design inclusive and compassionate classrooms where children are learning alongside their peers and alongside a team of professionals. So those professionals, of course, are the classroom teacher, the resource teacher, the learning assistance teacher, Aboriginal support workers, SEAs, youth care workers, and ELL teachers. One of the things that has happened is from a 4-year period of about 2014-15 to 2018-2019, we had a 44% growth in our SEA numbers. We added 144 SEAs over that period of time. And so that was the largest growth of staff that we had across our district as we were adding staff. We have added over 35 resource teachers to date, and those resource teachers, I am confident that come October, we will be very close to our 1-to-15 ratio to start for our resource teachers. And we've also added over 6 FTE of learning assistants at the same time. But again, going back to that group of professionals working together to create those inclusive, compassionate classroom communities, we need to be able to say our next year's work is about universal design for learning and instructional services and a response to intervention as part of all of our work together. If you have a follow-up question, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Okay, I love UDL and RDI. I love that our district is moving on that with the underbelly of the whole self-regulation piece, because that's what gets us going. That safety piece in the classroom, emotional regulation. I guess what I'm looking for, if I can clarify the question just a little bit better, when I think about, we got 144 SEAs, but that was added over that time frame that you cited, which is amazing, and definitely we need it with the numbers that our district carries for students with needs and the different complexities that come with their needs for support. What I'm looking for is what kind of redesign are we looking at and how we use our SEAs, how we deploy them, and how we will employ them into the classrooms through the hiring process and then back into the classrooms. What will that picture look like? Can you draw that for us by chance, or are we still in progress of looking at how that will be established?
Do you mean the role of the SEA in the classroom?
Sorry, I turned my mute off, so it takes me a couple seconds to come back to make sure there's no background sound. Well, we already know there's a predefined role, so it's how we're going to deploy them. So how many to the classroom are we, because we know logistically, when my child goes to school with his level 2 designation, he's not getting an SEA one-on-one. I know that. And as time increases through the educational system, that piece graduates off, depends on their abilities, hopefully. So what I'm looking at when we're looking at a decline of hiring, are we going to change how we're deploying our SEA employees into the classroom and how we're utilizing them, not necessarily what they're doing, but how we're utilizing them. and what that function looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much for clarifying that. This year is the first year where we have done a needs assessment on all students in Ministry of Education categories level 1 and 2. So our integration support teachers and our resource teachers have sat down together and they've done a needs assessment. I believe it's complete or will be this week, a needs assessment on every student. So we have that information year after year. What that information will allow schools to do and will allow the district to do is see, are we moving towards independence for each student each year? So as we're able to do that this year, what we'll be able to do in the coming years is really help the schools with, this is your SEA allocation. Here is how the SEAs can be deployed in your classroom settings to really help schools get the most out of their placements of the SEAs. One of the important things that I do want to mention is we have kept up to pace with our SEA growth and our category 1, level 1 and level 2 student growth. We've kept up, we've had a growth of 36% in those student populations, and we've had a growth of 36% in our SEAs over the same time. So we will have to do things differently. Things will have to look a little bit differently. We haven't made large adjustments yet, though.
Okay, you said a key word that I just want to tap into. Forgive me, Trustee Dykeman. You talked about increasing independence. Not all our students will have increased independence. Students like mine have and are. But we have a good portion that won't. And so will we be ensuring that we're cognizant of the importance of maintaining supports, maintaining versus slowly removing as they graduate through the system into middle school and high school? Will be ensuring that they're having that contact that they need?
Yes, 100%. And what I'm guaranteed of as we go through the needs assessment process is we're able to see year to year which students need that consistent hours allocated to them, and also which students may have gained some independence, so that we can reallocate certain levels of SEA staffing. It's never going to be a situation where we're saying we're trying to get everyone to independence so that we would need fewer SEAs. That is not the point at all. What we're attempting to do is grow independence so that we can then move the SEA staffing down to levels or to the ages where we would want to continue to start to grow independence in our younger years.
Wonderful. Thank you for that articulation. Our parents will benefit from hearing that response, and I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions.
Okay, thank you everybody for your first round questions. I do have more of a comment than a question on the budget before I go to the second speakers list. I'm discouraged to see, again, the grant funding and our one-time funding. Our board over the years has been very vocal about our concerns with grant funding through the BCSTA. The BCSTA has been very vocal. The years I've sat on in various committees provincially, been concerned about the funding coming in grant funding or one-time envelopes. This makes it very, very difficult for boards to plan their budgeting. It makes it very, very difficult to be able to look into the future. And then when you compound that with something like what we're dealing with right now with COVID, where you increase the instability in the system, you create a situation where, as a board, we're required to pass a balanced budget. We are required to demonstrate that we are able to be responsible financial stewards of the system. And this type of grant funding is an interesting way to bring in money to the system based on the provincial budgeting when there's sort of extra money or surplus money, or the money's there, whatever you'd like to call it. And then you're never actually cutting it, because all you're doing is just not renewing that grant. So somebody could say, well, the budget was cut. Well, yeah, technically, that money's not there again next year, but it allows that money to be said, well, no, we just didn't renew that grant. And you can move it around. You can move it around geographically. You can move it around to needs groups. And the budget itself never grows except based on the per pupil funding, where you have to increase that because it's a counting game. You know, there's this many people in seats. The budget is this much. And when the province is growing, it's easy to say the education budget has grown every year. That's easy. But the truth is that if you look at these pockets of grant money, they've moved around, or they haven't come back, or they're servicing something else. So I'm quite discouraged to see that trend is continuing, and believe that that's something that if we ever are truly going to do a proper service to educational funding, that will not be how we fund things. That's the truth. Because it creates a very difficult situation for boards of education to properly plan in a fiscally responsible manner going forward. So that is discouraging. All right, so on the second speakers list right now, I have Trustee Coburn, and then after that, I have Trustee Wilson. So I'm going to send Trustee Coburn live now. All right, just 1 second, Trustee Coburn, it's just spinning, little blue wheel. There you go.
That sounds so exciting. Like something exciting is about to happen to me. I'm about to be sent live. So thank you, Chair Dykeman. I would like to echo your sentiments on grants. I fully agree with you. Having worked in not-for-profit, I see exactly what they do. And also, I'd just like to add, it's a disruption to the continuity of learning, because a lot of our programs that are dependent on grants really support vulnerable kids and families, and when that's taken away, it really disrupts their learning. But to my question, so COVID seems to be exposing really huge gaps in our social fabric, and one of them is mental health. We talk a lot about mental health and mental wellness, and so I just want to talk about the impact of COVID on mental health on our kids and our students, our educators and our families. And I'm noticing that other provinces, for example, Ontario, of all places, has pledged $12 million to invest in the mental health and wellness of public education employees and families. I'm just wondering if the province of British Columbia, to your knowledge, Secretary Treasurer, has committed any kind of new funding to mental health, because we talk about how stressful this is. The government does as well. And then just quickly to kind of lead with this, they talk about the psychological impacts of what COVID is going to do to learning and learning environments. And one of the things that it's going to do is it's going to force us to get separate from our kids. And we've gone to this model of shared learning, open spaces, desks, away from that traditional model of individual desk. Sounds like we're going to have to go back to that. I'm wondering if we have any, where they're stored, and how they will be equitably distributed amongst the schools.
So, Trustee Coburn, to your first question on funding from COVID for mental issues, health issues, not that I'm aware of or have heard of to this point. On the subject of desks, we don't have a lot of them because we got rid of most of those attached desks that we spent, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, a huge process with Don Tomlinson went through trying to, with grants and educating people on how to use these. So we spent a lot of time and effort going away from those. So we don't have a lot of empty facilities anymore, so we don't have places to store them. So we don't have very much of that lying around. So if that's where we have to go, then we'd have to look at procuring some of that.
Okay. All right, Trustee Coburn, does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, I'm going to send Trustee Wilson live now. She has comment. Trustee Wilson, you're live.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I don't really have a question. It's more of a discussion on the motion, I guess, because we will be voting on this budget tonight. So yeah, I do want to reiterate my gratitude and thank you to Secretary Treasurer Isley and Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan and every other person. I know there's so many of you that work on this. I'm going to speak carefully and choose my words wisely. I've had a real internal struggle with this budget for the last week or so that I've known it's coming. And I know there's been an enormous stress on staff. That it's a painstaking process to create this. So I do want you to know that I understand that. I'm glad to hear that our reduced staff numbers won't probably have layoffs and that they can be done mostly through attrition or retirements. But in reality, next year we will have, 25 less SEAs, 2 less counselors, 8 less teachers, 6 less maintenance. So that will be that many less people working with our students or maintaining our schools. And that's just really hard to digest. So this is why I guess we are in this role, to do the hard work. I do want to say that I've always been grateful to be known as a district that surpasses the low standards that are set by the ministry for the amount of student support. We hire many more SEAs than are required. And the fact that we deliver so much extra to our most vulnerable makes us great. I would way rather be known as the district that goes above and beyond for its most vulnerable than the district that with the great glass buildings or the awesome furniture. So with that being said, I just, I also understand, I want to say the difference between capital versus operational, but I would have liked to see if there was any capital cuts we could have made first, at least to carry us through to next year without reducing any staff, especially those who work with our most vulnerable students and that are needed for the mental health issues that will be probably coming far greater in the next year. And then determine if the markets or housing or ISP, etc., bounce back, because that would give us a little bit of leeway before we cut those positions. Because just through experience alone, I've realized that once something is lost, it is often never regained. And we just learn to do more with less. So I hate to think about all those classrooms and students who will try to do more with less next year. So those are just my thoughts for the motion that's at hand. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, it took a minute for the blue circle. So thank you, Trustee Wilson, for your comments. So everybody knows we are going to do first and second reading tonight, and then this will go out and this will receive input, and there will be a budget open house from May 27th to 29th, and then the budget still has to come back for third reading. So I just wanted to clarify that we're not doing all readings of the budget this evening. The other thing is, I just want to clarify with the Secretary Treasurer on capital and the rules with capital funding versus operational. Secretary Treasurer, could you just clarify on that? Would you mind that?
If I understood Marnie correctly, if you're talking about using capital funds, we can't use capital funds to fund operating expenditures. If you're talking about like our buildings and those kind of things, those are separate and those are targeted and specific what we can use those for. Unless I misunderstood her question or comment.
I just wanted to clarify that we actually had that discussion would take place quite a bit during our deficit period. Because we were limited on what we could do when our district was in a deficit we couldn't take capital, unfortunately, to deal with deficit. Any transfer from capital to operational requires ministry approval for that, and is not something that is, as far as I know, happened very often. So thank you for everyone's comments and questions. I do not see any other speakers on this list. If I have missed you, it's just that the scroll has gone too quick for me, and just let me know. So we do have a mover and a seconder for the motion. I will restate the motion, and that is that School District number 35 Langley that the school district number 35 Langley 2021, that's a mouthful, annual budget bylaw in the amount of $261,626,067 be given first reading. That motion has been moved and seconded. I'm going to put the question now to the board, and I'm wondering if we could please state your opposition in the chat. So all those in favor, any opposed, please state your opposition. Okay, Trustee Wilson, opposed. I'm just going to ask one more time. Is there anybody opposed? Seeing no further oppositions to this motion, the motion is carried with Trustee Wilson opposed. We are now going to do the second reading. So I will ask for a mover and a seconder in the chat, please. That school district number 35 Langley 2020-2021 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $261,626,067 be given second reading. In the chat, I have Trustee Ross moving. Could I please get a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Ward. Any further comments or questions on this motion? I will ask one more time if there's any comments or questions on this motion. Seeing none, I'll put the question. Are there all those in favor? Any opposed? Please state your opposition in the chat. I have Trustee Wilson opposed. Asking for a second time for any opposition to the motion. Seeing none, the motion is carried with Trustee Wilson opposed. And with that, for those watching at home, please remember that May 27th to May 29th, there will be a virtual budget open house. We will be watching for your feedback. So thank you. That concludes the Secretary Treasurer's items. We are now on to the Superintendent's report. So I'm going to send our Superintendent live. And I see a presentation, which I will put into the queue. All right, over to you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Board Chair Dykeman. What I'm going to be speaking to is the COVID-19 update, really the restart plan, the transition back to in-class instruction on a partial basis effective for June 1st. So just want to bring everyone up to speed in terms of what's been done up to date, and then also, give an idea in terms of what people can expect for June 1st. This will not be a presentation that I will speak to alone. There's many components to this. So I'm going to give some broad brushstrokes in terms of what got us to date and what's been taking place. And then I'll have Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Barry Bunyan. He will speak to the health and safety components of this. And Assistant Superintendents Mel Gill and Woody Bradford will give a sense of what parents will see at the elementary and middle and secondary levels for the June the 1st. Presentation isn't showing right now, so I'm hoping it'll be able to. I'll work through the presentation. I'm not sure if you're seeing a PowerPoint right now come up, but we'll see if we can get it to start so that people can go along with me. So while that's getting sorted out.
It's live now, Superintendent.
Okay, great, thank you. So in terms, I'm going to move it right to the timeline, and so the second slide. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bradford. So really, spring break, that's when this kind of started. All of us were surprised in terms of how quickly this virus really impacted the world, certainly Canada, British Columbia, and Langley. And so it certainly was a major disruption to families, and that disruption continues. It impacted many on a very significant basis. And again, I applaud Bonnie Henry and the government for all the work they've done in terms of being able to work through this challenge. In terms of the school system, the first part that we dealt with was the support for essential service workers. And that was April 6th. That started off, and we went with 5 hubs. It was Tier 1. We started on out. We did a survey of families that fell into that particular category, and you're talking a lot of your emergency health workers there, and certainly people in terms of RCMP and others in terms of enforcement and fire department staff and all the rest of it that fell into the Tier 1 emergency health workers. So We started out with approximately 27 students, and I think a lot of that was trepidation, a culture of fear that still exists out there, and I can't understate that. Many people to this day, despite the progress that BC has made, are still nervous, and we're nervous to again put their students out to schools, even though they needed those supports. We started to see growth as people's confidence went forward. Managed to get that up to almost around 100 students at one point. But we realized quickly if we're going to move to tier 2, you weren't going to be able to do that at 5 sites. That just was not going to be manageable. So we made the move a couple of weeks ago to say, you know what, we're going to open all of our sites so that we can better support the tier 1 and tier 2, which moved up to numbers of approximately around 300 students. And that varied from place to place, particularly impacting our elementary schools, the K to 5 age. Is where a lot of folks certainly worry about making sure that their children are cared for and can get the education that they sometimes can't provide. They're working all day, they're tired at night, so they're wanting to kind of see that instilled. So that's a Monday to Friday, and the numbers varied again anywhere from 3 or 4 students on up to as high as 30 students at sites. So that was the next step. And then we also had vulnerable students. We have families out there that we know that remote learning, no matter what we do, will not work for them. We have a number of families under quite a bit of distress. And so I applaud the work of Mike Morgan and our Langley School District Foundation. As we reached out to these families, we've been providing food to up to over 600 families. And we've been working together with other community agencies to do the best we can to make sure people's basic needs could be met. And then the next step with that was, you know, how do we kind of start to integrate those kids back going forward? And it was quite interesting in terms of level, I think it was 1 and 2 or A and B students within our diverse abilities. How many of those, when we put the offer out, it's actually, many of them declined to come back within the school system. They're nervous. You know, they thought that their children may be at risk. And so thank you. They're very appreciative of the efforts. But I put that out there because I think we're seeing so similar signs, not just within our diverse abilities folks, but right across the board. So, but a ton of work has been done there to really make sure that we can do everything we can to support families. And then as we moved along, because it, you know, certainly appeared that BC was seeing some very good results in terms of how we were managing through this. The pressure on the economy obviously been devastated, and the school system plays a role in supporting that. And I think folks, the pressure on Bonnie Henry was, okay, you know what are we going to do to start to be able to kind of get the education system back in motion and again, get this economy going. So we ended up with a plan announcement that went out, and that announcement went out, I believe, on May 11th, that we would June the 1st have kids back to school. So what we did is during the that week of May the 19th to the 22nd, we reached out to families to determine, okay, where exactly are they at in terms of readiness to return? Because you can imagine our school system, it's one thing for an elementary school to prepare for 50 students to be back. It's another thing for them to prepare for 250 students to be back. Those are two different plans, especially given the amount of considerations you have to give around health and safety for these kids. So we ended up, I'll give you the survey data later, but really appreciate the efforts of staff to kind of say, okay, let's make those connections and find out where folks are at. The next step there was we were expected to put out on Monday our plan in terms of the ministry. They want to know what was June 1st going to look like. So I've been very fortunate to be able to work with collaboratively in terms of our partners, CUPE, 1260, 1851, our LTA, our LPBPA, our DPAC. I mean, all have been fantastic, and working with them on a weekly basis in terms of having some good conversations, some good questions, and they've all had great ideas. And we're trying to kind of morph these into something that is very conscious of people's workloads. You can imagine trying to balance both remote learning and on-site in-class instruction. What is that going to look like? And also making sure that we can make families as comfortable as possible in trying to make this transition. Then we have tonight, certainly as we'll be presenting in terms of the broad brushstrokes of this. The granular will be coming out on either at the end of the day, Wednesday or Thursday, and I'll kind of give you that differentiation right now, what that could look like going out to parents. What I've been doing is every Friday, It seems either through video or through another message. Working with Joe Abshire's fantastic job in terms of communications manager, and we've been trying to continue to keep people up to date in terms of questions and answers they have, and in terms of thanks, gratitude for the patience of parents as we work through this, and also to our staff, all staff at all levels that are really working diligently on behalf of kids. And then obviously Monday, you know what, I'm looking at that day, and I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous myself in terms of, you know, June 1st, you know what, incredible amount of work going underway, but until those kids start kind of arriving, what's that going to be like? And despite our best efforts, you know what, we're going to be learning along the way, and I'm sure it'll evolve and look a little bit different the following week through the work that and the learning that we do. So again, what parents can expect on the Wednesday at the end of the evening, I'll be putting out something that will speak to both staff and also to parents on a global basis of here are the expectations consistent. There's not going to be differentiation on the health and safety standards site to site. You can expect those will be met. What can you expect in terms of certainly a service of 2 days or 1 day, depending on the age of kids, and I'll mention that a little bit further in the plan. And also in terms of, you know, that there will be transportation provided for those that it is necessary. So kind of giving some what can people expect in terms of what they'll see. What the schools will do by the end of the day, Wednesday or Thursday, I'm trying to obviously get that done as soon as possible, but you can imagine the litany of things to think about, is indicate to parents, okay, we're going to give you the granular. So the schools will reach out just to those that have decided, yes, I'd like to go back. I'd like to have 2 days. I'm a grade 2 student. Okay, here's the start time. They'll be staggered. Here's what the staggered breaks could look like. Here's the staggered lunch looks like. Here's some of the protocols into the building. Here's what you need to bring, and it's labeled. Do you need technology? So on and so on and so on. They will give the granular, and so parents can have that to go, okay, I'm going on Monday, Tuesday versus Thursday, Friday, and so on and so forth. So that's the type of thing that people can expect going forward on that basis as we go ahead. So why the 5 stages? So I'm going to work through a little bit in terms of kind of what got us here. And this is again for the ministry. So I'm giving you ministry information of what I'm told about, okay, Gord, you got to get underway with this thing, and here's our rationale why and what this would look like. And they've got these stages, and they do feel that children do pose low risk to each other. That is what they feel the research does support. So they're saying that, again, adult to adult, that's different in terms of, but they say certainly in terms of kids, that transmission risk they feel at this point is something that is safe. They also feel that they've learned from other places in the world that have decided to go down this road. My cautionary piece on that is, again, these are places that had a lot more than 3 weeks left in the school year. And so, you know what, the pickup on that started out very, very small, and sometimes as low as 10% to start. They do show some growth over time. But again, if you've got 4 or 5 months left in the school year versus 3 to 4 weeks, you can imagine the difference there. They also feel that they're going to be, how they're going to respond in the future to this is rather than just a blanket closure, because I have to be honest with you, in terms of some of our communities, certainly outside the Lower Mainland, they have not seen the cases that we've seen here. And they also are communities, some of them, that are really struggling with this remote learning piece. They don't have the technology, the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So they are talking about in the future, if there's an outbreak in Langley, if it's at a school, is it that school community? Is it going to be maybe all of Walnut Grove, or is it going to be all of Langley? Or is it going to be all of Metro, but not necessarily there's an outbreak in Langley, the province shuts down. You can expect that they will respond differently, because they're really working towards trying to have K to 7 certainly open 100% for September. And they also understand there's some parents saying, you know what, no matter what you do, I'm not going. I'm not sending my child. I'm nervous about it. I'm not comfortable. Actually, I've also built in some very good routines for my family at this point. And I've just kind of got them settled, and I don't know if I'm really ready here. And I might be ready in September, I might not. And that's why we're trying to say, if you're ready for it, let's go. But parents are not compelled to necessarily do this. The 5 stages that have been put out is we were initially in stage 5, which was just a total lockdown, basically in the provinces. And you can see as we've kind of been trying to move out of that economically, You're seeing businesses open up. You're seeing, I think, a population that's relatively restless and frustrated. And we don't want to get too carried away because we've done a lot of work to get good things to happen. But you can sense it. People, it's been tough on everybody, me included. And then you're going to see that we started to move towards that step 4. We started again, the vulnerable students, the essential service workers, and now the stage 3. And stage 3 is, again, they're looking at anywhere from 2 to 3 days a week at elementary, and they're looking at K to 5, sorry, grades 1 to 6 to 7, 1 day a week, and again, 8 to 12, 1 day a week. What they also stated is something around density. And so I'm just making sure parents clearly understand that when you hear that you can have your child in school 2 to 3 days a week, they can never exceed a density of 50%, which means the capacity of that building, if it's 300 students, can never have more than 150 students in the building at that time. And that includes your essential service workers, your vulnerable kids. That's it. It doesn't include staff. This is strictly kids that we're speaking here. And in the case of a middle or secondary school, that cannot exceed, again, 20% of density. So again, your Brookswood, you have 1,000 students that could potentially have a capacity to be there. You can never have more than 200 students in the building at any given time. So I just put those things out for you looking forward. What we're going to be doing again, and certainly Assistant Superintendents Bradford and Gill will speak to it in terms of what that'll look like, in terms of what people can kind of expect in terms of those couple of days. We're going to go with the 2 days at elementary. We really have done a lot of work on the remote learning piece, and I do want to be able to give our teachers that ability to be able to continue to do that as thoroughly as possible, given the circumstance of trying to manage both. And we do feel that that'll suffice at this point in time in terms of our learning kind of going forward, and a day a week from a grade 6 to 12 going forward, and I'll get them to speak to those models. Stage 2, they're looking at potentially, you'd be looking at K to 5, 100%, and 6 to 7, 100%, and then you'd 8 to 12 at 40. Again, notice those densities, so 2 days a week, so that you'd be looking at still at secondary. What we've been told is that they're really trying to work towards, if the summer goes extremely well, we're not talking another outbreak here. If things kind of went the way they have been the last week and continued on that path, you're going to see certainly a significant amount of pressure to open certainly K to 7 at least 100%. So you're kind of going, whoa, you mean you're going to go from 15 students in a class potentially up to 25 to 30? Yes, that's what I'm saying they would be looking for. They would be looking at something in the order of 2 days a week for the older children, and they feel, again, they may be a little bit more at risk in terms of transmission of this disease. And they also know that older students tend to be a little bit more comfortable around the remote learning side than you do with certainly a K to 5. So those are kind of the stages that people I just want to be conscious of and aware of, that they're kind of working towards, and where we sit within that scale currently. Again, I mentioned in terms of why the restart now, again, in terms of the number of cases out there, in terms of overall that we've seen an impact on. There is a belief that the longer our vulnerable students are out, the impact that's having, and we're out there right now offering it, but I'm going to be honest with you again, I've got some that are saying, yes, thank you, but no thanks. They do know that schools are a critical part in terms of the economy, and that is just the reality. And they're also, again, I think they're trying to see what they can learn over these 3 or 4 weeks in terms of how that'll inform given the fall. Guiding principles that we've been operating from, ensuring, again, health and safety is key. A ton of work there, and I commend all of our custodial staff working very diligently to make sure that these sites are in a great place, and our support staff too. All support staff, and even we've got teachers. They're all playing a role in terms of being really respectful in terms of trying to kind of keep these things in place. The support for our essential service workers at 5 days a week, and our vulnerable students at either 1 to 5. It's very dependent on the child. Not everyone wants to be there every day, but whatever that looks like, that's going to be maintained right throughout, no matter what happens. And then again, we're looking at that continuity of education piece for all students. So there may be some students out there that we know, and again, I'm going to pick a secondary school, for example, and say, you know what, this math, I'm doing the best I can remote, and I'm in math 10, and I'm still struggling. I'm doing the very best. So I could really use at least a day a week where I can get in, with my teacher or someone from the math department that I can sit down with and be able to ask the question I need, and maybe I can get a little bit of that one-on-one support that I so much miss. I may not need it in the other areas. In fact, I might be good with a couple of hours and go. I think that model is going to be very fluid as long as we make sure the density numbers are okay and we can make sure people can enter and exit in a healthy manner while they're there. But I think with the older children, we're not looking at saying you're going to stay, you're here for the day no matter what. That's not the point of this. Really, the point is saying, I'm someone that could use additional assistance at this point in time. And that's really what we're looking at in there for those particular grades. In terms of the survey, I thought just for interest's sake, there was approximately 22,000 students that we have. And we managed to get in contact with around 21,000. So that's a very good coverage in terms of trying to determine who's going to be coming back into our buildings. And right now, I've had about 6,200 folks running anywhere from 400 to, well, there's no one's exceeding 400 to 550. Walnut Grove Secondary, they're the largest. They have a population of over 2,000. They have the biggest return, obviously, given the size. We've got some sites with about 50 kids, some of our smaller places that are looking at it. So if you look at the overall, we're going around 28 to 30%. And really that kind of ties into what we thought as a staff you would see. And I think that again speaks to people saying, you know what, I'm either in a very good place, and so give help to those that need it. If someone needs to go in, let them go. That's great. My child's good. I think it also speaks to the fact that we've got some people, staff included, absolutely staff included, you know what, I'm still, despite what I'm hearing, I'm still worried. And you know what, we have to acknowledge this to work with it the best we can. Transportation, we typically have well over, I'm trying to remember whether there's 1,500 to 1,800 people that would ride the bus. We're sitting now at about 281 that are looking for that. So we're trying to kind of work out in the secondary system, something that may be able to do a morning, noon, and end of day. So kids that maybe just need half a day, we can maybe build that flexibility in. And I know that our transportation department right now has the names of kids, and they're starting to try to see in terms of building routes. And obviously there's some health and safety protocols that Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan can comment on in terms of trying to maybe make sure that those are in place going forward. So just a bit of a flavor in terms of the number of global things we've been considering. And again, at least it's been a collaborative process. It's been a lot of learning. But I understand the angst that's still out there, and I think we're going to do the best we can to manage that going forward. So I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan to speak to the health and safety components.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. Can everyone hear me okay? Not okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. Yes, as you can imagine, health and safety has dominated a lot of our thoughts and plans over the last while. Well, since this all began, but certainly in the last week or so, as we're trying to put plans in place, and we are putting plans in place to have schools open up in its limited capacity next week. We got a barrage of information sort of all at once from the Ministry of Education, from Fraser Health, from WorkSafe BC. We also got information from the BC Centre of Disease Control. We've accessed the World Health Organization websites, and really would like to thank particularly the work of Megan Duke, Michelle Guillou, our director. Megan Duke is our health and safety manager, because they've put in a lot of time and basically taking the procedures that we had developed previously for the hubs and going through the updated current ministry and other information that was sent to us last week, and to incorporate the information from that into some new documents. So I'll take a few moments here to sort of walk you through what we've developed, and also give you a sense of what the steps are moving forward to ensure all of these guidelines are in place for the start of school on Monday. So there are two documents that are key for all of this that will be posted if they haven't been already. They may already be on the district website. They were, again, developed using the information that we had previously developed, and with all of the new information provided through the Ministry, WorkSafe BC, etc. The first one, the graphic on the left there, the Education Restart Guidelines for Schools K-12, COVID-19. That's kind of the main reference document that for our district. That's our district's detailed plan. It's 20+ pages long. It's got appendices in it. It has links to different websites to get further detail, further information, and it lists in detail all the expectations for the health and safety guidelines for all of our sites, including our school board office, including transportation buses and everything. So that document is very, very detailed. All principals were given a copy of this document last week. Our employee groups and our partners were all given copies of this document last week as well. And so that is out there and on our website. Doesn't look like a document, it's just a title on the right, the District COVID-19 Safety Plan for Schools. You'll have to take my word for it that that's actually a document. It's about 4 pages long. And what it is it takes information from the larger guidelines that I just talked about, which are shown on the left there, and it becomes a bit of a checklist for schools to use because it's very specific about what has to happen in each school. And I'll take a moment to share with you how we use that to ensure that our plans are consistent, as Superintendent Stewart said, in all of our buildings. So if you could follow the flow chart there, starting on the left, the checklist, which is the one that's the safety plan, district safety plan for schools, has been developed, as I said, from the guidelines, the more extensive document. It's streamlined for ease of reference. Not everything in the guidelines describes a specific action or a specific course of action or a specific duty that needs to be done at a school. So we streamlined it. Thank you to Megan Duke, because, you know, a 20+ page document's a bit overwhelming at times. So we streamlined that down. The process that is in place this week is that document does go to each site's joint health and safety committee. As per WorkSafe guidelines, every work site in the district, including our maintenance, including the school board office, has to have a joint health and safety committee. They receive both the guidelines, the bigger document, and the shorter one, the safety plan documents. And this week, they are having meetings to review that information to ensure that the procedures that are required in order to ensure safety of staff and students during this time is in place. There is a process for them to amend the document if there are some things in their school that specifically need to be looked at in a different way or enhanced or something. So they are doing that. And then once that has done, once the Joint Health and Safety Committee members have reviewed it, which has already occurred in some of our schools and will occur probably tomorrow and the next day, this document that they create, so they end up basically reviewing and approving the document, becomes the safety plan for the school. So each school safety plan is reviewed and approved by the Joint Health and Safety Committees. And then finally, in the last box there, the blue box, the plan is to be distributed to all staff, communicated to the public, and posted in the school prior to June 1st. So the general documents are already available on the website. All schools, all principals, all Joint Health and Safety Committees have copies of this information and are going through it. And the end result of that is the plans will be implemented in each of the schools, and it will be posted and distributed to all involved. So just some key points. Obviously, they're very large documents, and if I was to go through them with you step by step, it would take a considerable amount of time. But they are available for you to review if you wish. But I will go through some key things. Some significant shifts we have made is we have ensured that every one of our schools and every one of our sites have both day and evening custodians. In elementary schools, typically the custodians are only in the evening, so we've made some shifts to make sure that they are also there during the day. And that has also required us to do a little bit of redeployment from some of the schools with larger custodial staffs like high schools to some other places. We've gone through what the expectations are for every school with numbers of students and staff, and we've allocated the resources so every single school has day and evening custodians. And in the document, they are very specific duties for a day custodian and an evening custodian. So a couple of key things that we're required to do is to ensure that all touch surfaces are wiped down at least twice a day, and a school is cleaned and disinfected at least once a day. And so the day and the evening shifts divvy up the work to ensure that while students and staff are in the building, touch surfaces are the primary attention. And then in the evening, the more deeper clean tends to happen. So all touch surfaces in all common areas will be cleaned multiple times a day, not just twice a day. Washrooms will be cleaned every 45 to 60 minutes. So that allows that to be cleaned a lot more frequently than it would be normally. Reception areas will be cleaned every hour. And again, special attention in all of these areas to all the touch surfaces, the door handles, the knobs, the sinks, the door jambs around the wall, that kind of thing. Staff rooms are cleaned after every break. So after a recess or a lunch break, the day custodian will go in and again, wipe everything down. Evening custodians will clean all surfaces in classrooms and other rooms. So getting into classrooms a lot during the day will be a challenge because there will be students and staff in the rooms. So the evening custodians will focus their attention in those areas quite a bit. We have the ability to do something called biomisting. Biomisting is basically you have a machine and you use a hospital grade disinfectant solution that is sent out from the machine as a mist, and you walk through an area misting it, and it gets into obviously the surfaces, but also the nooks and crannies, etc. We have 2 machines in the district, and we have to not only biomist all of our buildings, but we also have to biomist our buses. And because we have developed specific procedures for transportation as well. 2 machines cannot do every building and every bus every night. So what will happen is every school will be biomisted at least once a week. So that's an additional cleaning. We actually aren't required to biomist, but we have the ability to do it. So we're doing it as much as we can. And the buses will be biomisted every night in order to ensure cleanliness there. The procedures for the use and cleaning of district buses, we have gone through the different requirements there. There is going to be some changes on how students get on the bus and how they get off the bus. So it's done in a manner where we can work to control, the seating arrangements. There'll only be 1 student per bench seat unless they're with someone else in their household. These are, of course, the ministry guidelines. And when students enter a bus, they're going to come on, they're going to have to load from the back to the front, and then they will unload from the front to the back. All of these things have been worked out in working with our transportation manager, Tim Andronic. Just want to let you know that these measures do exceed the ministry minimum cleaning requirements. We decided to push the envelope a little and try to do the cleaning at the greatest level that we could. You may have some questions around supplies. I just want you to know we are fully stocked with supplies to get us through to the end of June, no problem. In fact, beyond that, we have been able to get some supplies of hand sanitizer. So most classrooms will have hand sanitizer in them. Every school will have hand sanitizer for the main area, the reception, that kind of thing. Also want to point out that even if disinfectant did become in short supply, which it will not, but even if it did, soap and water does the trick with COVID as well. And we will not be running out of soap and that kind of thing in all of our schools. And one thing that we are reinforcing with all of our staff and as we move forward, because as Superintendent Stewart said before, a lot of people are very nervous around all of this. This is something that does draw anxiety, and we are working with staff to ensure they feel comfortable. But one of the things that makes us a bit different than some other places is we have the ability to control who is in our building, who is in any of our buildings, to a much greater extent than some organizations might be. So for instance, if you're a public bus in BC Transit in downtown Vancouver, Victoria, or anywhere, Langley, for instance, when the doors open, people get on the bus, and you may be able to control how many people are on a bus by not letting more than a certain number in, but you don't have much control who comes on. With staff and students, the ministry is requiring daily health checks for all of our staff and students. A daily health check is fairly simple. It's a series of questions that will be asked of staff and students every day, or parents. Are you in contact with anyone in your household who has COVID? Have you traveled outside of Canada? recently? Do you have any of the symptoms of the flu, which is very similar to COVID? If anybody answers yes to any of these questions, they will not be allowed to come to school. They'll either have to stay at home if they are at home, or they will be isolated for a parent to come pick them up if they're a young child or something along those lines. So we have that ability to really monitor and control the people in the building and be able to ensure that people who are potentially infectious with the disease are not actually in our buildings. And we actually also have procedures to deal with things if symptoms arise throughout the day that weren't there when they were asked the question. So principals and teachers will be involved in the daily health checks with students and staff. And then with that in mind, and also all the procedures that we've developed, we're very, very confident that our schools will be safe. One thing that I've said to a lot of people is, I don't think our schools have been cleaner or more safe in the history of Langley with everything that we're going on. And that's the way it should be right now in order to ease the anxiety and the stress that people are feeling over all of this. I think that's the last slide. Yes, it is. So before I move on back to the superintendent, there may be some questions.
Thanks, Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunny. I think we'll take some questions at the end. We just got one last little section.
Yes.
So, so thank you. And you can already, I think all of you here, this is a massive amount of documentation and regulations and bureaucracy and everything to kind of work through. So very appreciative of the efforts of all those involved and working through it. And for the last component here, I believe it's Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford will start us off just on what parents can expect at elementary, and then Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill to the secondary. Over to you, Woody Bradford.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart, and thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bunyan. In terms of the continuity of learning plan, as Superintendent Stewart is speaking about, it has been an extensive exercise to make sure that we are prepared for students to come back on June 1st. And starting the whole process, a huge thank you to the work of our 5 elementary schools around setting up the ESW hubs. It provided a good framework for us to start around the learning and how we were going to set the protocols up within each of our schools, and the staff in those buildings, the leadership of the principals, the support staff and the teachers, and our bus drivers working collaboratively together to make sure that those buildings were safe, set us in a really good place to prepare for what June 1st was going to look like for face-to-face return for students, and also balancing the remote learning piece. When we as an organization embark on these new opportunities, we always look through the lens of what we do around our vision to support our learning communities in an innovative, inspiring and unified ways. So when we began through the process of planning for June 1st, we wanted to ensure that we were making measures that were unified across our district, and as Superintendent Stewart mentioned, health and safety was at the top of that list, so that each of our buildings, K-12, were going to make sure those standards were at an excellent level to ensure that our students and staff coming into the buildings felt safe. And it was a very controlled environment in terms of how we were providing the learning within inside those schools. And then the innovative piece for us was to ensure that our principals and vice principals had the opportunities to work with their staff to ensure that the learning conditions they were setting up in terms of their building, site specific, and the staffing levels were in place for us to be able to support the students we needed to coming back. And within that, we needed to ensure that we had the information that was possible for us to make decisions at school to actually set the frameworks up in a way that they were going to be successful for. And we set 3 frameworks up around our elementary, middle, and secondary levels to ensure that we were setting the standard within each of our schools. And one of the things that I think is a huge celebration of the work we've been doing is just the focus and continual focus on community we have as a school district. And we started way back after spring break talking about the importance of connection within our schools and making sure that we connected with our students and our families and our staff throughout the entire process. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of our staff, our support staff, our teachers, our principals and vice principals for the work they did over the last week to collect the information necessary for us to actually make decisions and inform what we were going to do around the continuity of learning within inside the schools as we returned back in June 1st. So a huge thank you to everyone for that work. Obviously, going back with the numbers that we had from the calls that went out and the surveys that were sent out to our families and our students, we needed to ensure that as we balance what we are currently doing with the remote learning piece, which has been exceptional work led by our instructional services team and our IT department, just to make sure that we had all the infrastructure ready, and also just the amazing work our teachers have done and our support staff have done online to support the remote learning for all our students. We wanted to ensure that as we transition back into face-to-face learning, there was going to be a balance in terms of what we were doing for our students, our parents, and our staff, to ensure that we were maintaining a level that we could actually maintain for everyone to feel like we are being successful in the frameworks we are providing going forth. And so at each one of the levels in terms of planning for this, we just want to thank our leadership group of our principals and vice principals for the time that they've put in to give us feedback in a very collaborative manner about what this was going to look like to be successful for each of their sites, to ensure that they were going to provide a level of excellence in the learning. For our K-5 schools, in terms of how we set the framework up, as Superintendent Stewart spoke to, we set it up over the 5 days to ensure that 50% of returning students would come on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then the other 50% returning would come on Thursdays and Fridays. And again, that was site specific in terms of making sure that everyone had the same framework so that we could actually maintain the controls within our schools for the students coming in and the staff coming in, to maintain those guidelines of health and safety that we needed to ensure that the ministry was setting for us as a standard. And within those standards, we wanted to make sure that we are continuing to provide the level of excellence we are in the remote learning, and with the face-to-face that we were supporting our students around literacy and numeracy and their health and wellness when they came back into our schools, and finding a fine balance of what that was going to look like. So what that was going to mean for our K-5 students as they came back was ensuring that as we set the students up, that we would stagger start times, we would stagger break times like recess time and lunchtime, to ensure that only 25% of students were traveling in and out of the school to control the health and safety guidelines that we had in place, and ensure that the spaces that we were utilizing, our classrooms, were again within the guidelines of the health and safety to provide those supports for our staff and our students as they work through the learning. And that was a really important piece for us to make sure that we had this framework and was unified across our district, and then at each one of our sites, based on the numbers they had, they used this framework to determine how they were going to take students in on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday. And these were for our students returning on June 1st. What hasn't changed is our ESW students continuing to receive support 5 days a week, and then our diverse learners continuing, our vulnerable learners continuing to provide support for them anywhere from 1 to 5 days. So again, a huge thank you to our staff to be able to provide that and continue support. So you will notice on the framework that Wednesdays are not on the framework, but that's an opportunity for us to continue the support for ESW and vulnerable students. So our schools, our elementary schools, are still active on those days, providing a learning environment for those students to be successful. And that's unified across the system in our elementary schools. And that was the balance between the safety and the learning piece that we needed to make sure that we upheld as we went through. And there are some things to consider at each of our sites as we built the plan around the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for students to return on June 1st. And some of those considerations as they built the plan, the parents should be aware of as they return into the schools and they drop their students off, their children off in the morning, is that it might look different and it will look different than it looked September to March. Many of our elementary schools have got multi-age groupings within classrooms. Again, within those classrooms, making sure that we maintain the health and safety guidelines of the physical distancing. So we are making sure that the staff and students in those classrooms, that those guidelines are met, and we're maximizing the space around the health and safety guidelines. We want to make sure that across the week we balance staffing ratios to support students the best way we possibly can in elementary schools, from in-class learning opportunities to supervision to controlling the environment to maintain those health and safety guidelines. We want to make sure that we communicate exceptionally well to our parents out in the field about the things that we're doing to provide learning at each one of the schools. And as Superintendent Stewart mentioned, each one of our schools will send home that information on Thursday that's site-specific to our parents so that they can understand what it's going to look like for their children going back into school. And then the actual school structure itself was a consideration as well in terms of how the layout of the building was determined, also had an impact on how we structured and set the building up for students to be safe and staff to be safe. And all those considerations, the intention was at the heart of what we were doing is to ensure that we were supporting all our students in face-to-face and remote learning with a balance in terms of what we were trying to achieve over the last 4 weeks of this school year. And as you can see, the students in terms of how we supported them, the ESWs continue with the 5 days a week. The June 1st students will return on the 2 days, the Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday in the groupings, and then the vulnerable learners can receive support from 1 to 5 days. An example of a elementary school in terms of how they've laid it out, so you can gives you some context in terms of one side in terms of how they're setting it up. You can notice that they've located the last name of students and families arriving at certain times based on certain grades. And again, that is to ensure those staggered start times are there so that the control zones can be maintained and the health and safety guidelines can be in place. There are learning opportunities throughout the day that are built into the day. And again, making sure that we ensure that we have those breaks built in for support staff and teachers and outside time, which certainly right now, with all the learning that we've been doing with online learning, we will take those opportunities at the elementary level to get our students outside and having learning opportunities outside and just enjoy the fresh air and instead of being in front of a screen being outside and enjoying the opportunities to do things in the natural environment. So those activities are built through the day, and the staggered start times and staggered end times ensure that the control zones are in place for students and staff to be successful. So that is the key, that is the elementary model that has been set up for our students and staff to be successful as we return June 1st. And then the bridge between our secondary and elementary model is our middle school model. And our middle school model is set up very similar in terms of ensuring that we control the entrance and exits of our buildings by possibly having staggered start times. The middle schools, as many people know, are set up into pods, and our middle schools are working diligently to the best of their capability to have students with one of their pod teachers present within the groupings that they are trying to maintain at the school level. They're doing their best to try and maintain that connection as we work through each one of the frameworks at the middle school. The middle schools are looking at Tuesdays and Thursdays for students to return on June 1st at, again, 20% density within the school. And our numbers work really well for our middle schools to be able to do that, with, again, Monday to Friday still operating with our ESW hubs in our middle schools, and then our vulnerable students receiving support from 1 to 5 days. On the Tuesdays and Thursdays, parents can expect, again, our middle school teachers supporting students with remote learning around literacy and numeracy and their health and well-being. And again, that might possibly include some of our exploration teachers helping them and supporting that learning within inside that environment so those kids can get those enriched activities that we know make our middle schools so exceptional for our students and what they're doing. So that is the K-8 perspective in terms of our elementary and middle schools. And now I'm just going to pass it over to Assistant Superintendent Mal Gill to talk about the secondary model.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bradford. Just want to just reflect on the 3 words that Assistant Superintendent Bradford started with, which is unified, flexible, and innovative. And we are at the secondary level trying to do all of those 3 things as well in the world where we're asked to have students in 1 day during the week. And again, it was described already by Superintendent Stewart that we are looking to encourage or to get to a place where we have 20% density or up to 20% density per day in the school based on capacity of the building. So I think we started with the premise that in the secondary world where we wanted to ensure that our schools were accessible, and we had the flexibility to cater to the needs of the students that have been working remotely over the period of the last few weeks. We're going to continue to work to try and achieve those goals through a number of different avenues. But mostly really encouraging our schools to be open and available for our students on each of the days of the week so that students can access the building. Obviously doing that in a very controlled way, and we're going to continue to work through that so that we can provide tutorial support for our students in reinforcing the work that they've been doing around their remote learning in their homes. And again, not the easiest way to learn for many students. Many have actually taken on the learning and certainly thrive, but there's many students that require and in fact need the face-to-face instruction, and this model provides us with that opportunity. And again, looking at the model itself, it's dividing students up so that at the secondary level, although they could complete the amount of time that we needed to be in the building on a single day, the administrators have elected to go with 2 half days for students. Again, still providing flexibility within that model so that if students required to stay for a full day, they could do that through individual conversations. But that would happen throughout the week. The Wednesdays, just like the K-5 model, will remain an opportunity to continue on with remote learning and have vulnerable students in the building and working with our staff as well. So the world of flexibility is certainly something we really strive for at the secondary level. We're looking at kind of a continuation of that hub model within the building itself, looking at our 5 core areas, so languages, socials, science, math, and English. In addition to that, adding a block of support, which would be utilized, which would be serviced through resource teachers, SEAs, and some of our elective teachers who would otherwise who don't have students at this particular time. They could help in support, especially if they were familiar with some of the other subject areas, so they could help students. The idea is that students would rotate through each of the 6 areas, depending on the needs for each student. So let's say, for example, I was struggling with math. I could sign up for math and spend an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes with a person from the math department who could be there to help me with my remote learning. And if I, for chance, the spaces for math filled up in the morning for that first block, I could go to that support block or go to a second subject area that I may need support with. And then when there's a transfer of students from one place to another, I could move into that math block and get support while still getting support in that additional independent study area. Electives certainly are going to play an important part here. I think there's certainly an opportunity for our elective teachers to bring students in, invite them in to finish projects, re-engage students around some of their passion areas. And again, trying to really fill the void of the social disconnect that's occurred over the last period of time, and really give students an opportunity to really get back in and working with their hands through certainly a safe mode of operation for sure. So again, all of our secondary schools are going to be following this type of model where it's going to be that flexible models. There's going to be different opportunities on how communities are going to sign up. Some will sign up beforehand, where students are going to be doing that as appointments online, while others will simply be invited based on their grade or based on their alpha to the school on particular days. And then when they come to the school on those days, they would sign up or come to certain areas. All that information would be released to the community on the Thursday, so that students knew where to go, which entrance to come in, and what procedures to follow, and what materials to bring along as well. And so again, each community will work on that individually. The current slide shows a sample shape of the day for secondary. Again, looking at the rotation where, say on a Monday, you'd have a group of students that would be there rotating twice through the through 2 different rotations of that 6 hubs plus the electives, and then having the opportunity to get through a tutorial with teachers. And as Superintendent Stewart has already mentioned, the work really is the work, and we don't want to get to a place where we're having students congregate into large groups, and again, and really impacting the physical distances against with one another, as young folks may tend to do. And so what we'd like to do is really really stress to students that this is an opportunity for them to come in to get that extra support. And should they get to a place where they feel comfortable with the information that's been provided, we will have systems in place so that we can allow students to be dismissed partway through even a morning or an afternoon based on what they've completed. Opportunity, the break is an opportunity for us to kind of recalibrate, allow students from the morning to move on, bring new students in. The thought is really to have 2.5 hours of tutorial time in one day for a student is plenty. And it gives the student an opportunity to go away, work on the material that they've had support with, start to really work remotely with their teacher once again, and then come in one more time during the week just to do a check-in to ensure that that work is being done the way they need to, or to get to reinforce the instruction that's been provided for students. And just before I finish, I certainly want to take the opportunity really to thank our staff, especially our principals, who have spent an enormous amount of time putting this plan together. Getting to a place of face-to-face instruction, incorporating transportation, incorporating the complexities of volunteers, and gathering that information and putting this puzzle together is something that I'm proud of the work that our principals have done, and they have worked in collaboration with their staffs, their department heads, their resource teachers, their support staff, and of course instructional services, and the work that they've been doing around continuity of learning as well. So again, it's been a team effort, and I think we've gotten to a really good place, and I'm looking forward to seeing students back in our buildings on June 1st.
Thank you so much for the really thorough report and the incredible amount of work that the entire team has put in. I'm going this way, but I'm waiting for, there we go. The blue circle is slow tonight. There we go. So thank you for all of the work that you have done, for the really thorough report and this excellent update. I do have a speakers list, and in order of speakers list, the first person on my list is Trustee Perot. I'm just going to send her live with her question. So let me just hit live. There we go. All right, you're live now, Trustee Perot.
Awesome, thank you. I have all kinds of interesting things all over my screen right now, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Firstly, can never say thank you enough. Our teams are just doing such a fantastic job, and it's quite profound, and the focus on community, especially from our individual schools, has been quite overwhelming. And watching the videos come out in social media, the four squares, community drive-throughs, all the things that are occurring are just such an exceptional demonstration of support, of care, demonstrating passion for your work, and a desire to just help our kiddos feel okay. And it takes a lot, and I know there's a huge sacrifice, so I just really want to acknowledge that before I say anything. And there's no words that would ever be enough for what you guys are doing right now, so I thank you for that. I got a question for boy, we heard so much. So I'm kind of like going all the way back to you, I believe, Superintendent, through the chair. With regard to stage 2, we're in stage 3, pardon me, stage 3. I don't know if it's more of a point of a clarification when we're looking at what the ministry guidelines are telling us to do and how we've communicated per se, talking about vulnerable students versus our, here's a challenge. I know there's been a number of our special needs parents who are confused between vulnerable students and special needs and what's the quantification? Is there an overlap? Is it intersecting? I know there is. I spent a good amount of time in conversations with people in the community, helping them understand your intention to vulnerable students is our special needs as well as others. And that 5 days a week support that the ministry is indicating that is available for students who require those essential supports that are present. I'm just wondering if there's a way in our next communication cycle we can tidy up some of the language just because everybody's reading things differently right now and it makes it challenging for people. So that piece becomes a little bit convoluted, as well as the piece regarding, I think it's there's a certain number of students that were allowed in a school, 100 students or 150 students, whatever the number is. It's not abundantly clear in the communication. So when parents don't understand, like we can't bank that they're getting this message that you delivered today. Majority of our viewers are the same people again and again. So if we have a communication piece that indicates that we can only have a certain number of kids in the school at any given time, at which point our hands are tied to ensure that that health and safety and wellness is being supported appropriately and safely and maintaining those standards. I think that would just help some of the anxieties that are there. That's just a simple communication piece. And really, in essence, that's really all I have. It's not really a question, it's probably just more, are we able to look at some of that language?
Sorry, thank you, Trustee Perot. Superintendent, did you get that okay? You just need to unmute yourself. Just unmute. Only you can unmute yourself. just need you to hit the button. It's right there, right in the middle. I promise.
It's still not doing it.
There you go. You got it. Good job.
Good now. Yeah,
It's
Yay!
Yay.
What time is it?
It's a couple tries. There you go.
Midnight somewhere in the world. Anyway, so thank you. I used my iPad Pro. It's quite funny watching I use my finger instead of the. Anyways, that's hilarious. I'm a very tired man. So a couple of things in terms of your questions. We're going to address them in a couple of ways. One, there is a vulnerable students learning committee, and feel free, Mike Morgan, if I get any of this wrong. That really looks at both our diverse learners and students that don't necessarily fall into that category, but may have a host of other reasons why they need on-site support. That is done. Those are done through individual communications. Those families are they've been reached out to. They'll continue to be reached out, and we had a priority order because they certainly can identify within those schools. They know best in terms of who's most urgent as they work down through that list. So that is in terms of to address that part. I want you to make sure that you know that we have reached out to those families. In terms of communication part, Joe again does a magnificent job on that. And what I've explained in terms of density and such, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not going to be a big issue at this point because we only got 30% of the people even willing to come in. So we're going to be able to do quite a nice job of staying under that 50% or 20% threshold. But we are sending out a letter Wednesday. Joe has a Q&A as part of that, and that we will be what you're getting tonight. Our community's getting Wednesday, so you're getting the first bit of it. If people tune in, I encourage them to. That's a bonus. But if they didn't, everything you've seen, we're going to make sure that they clearly get, and then they'll get the granular level to what Woody and Mel were speaking about of their own specific circumstances. That's going to come directly from the school. So a couple of pieces out there, tons of stuff. But yeah, I hear you in terms of the questions there.
Thank you, Superintendent. I now have on the list Vice Chair Todd. I'm just going to send him live. You're now live, Vice Chair Todd.
Am I live? I'm trying to unmute myself.
I can assure you, you're unmuted.
Yeah. Oh, he just muted himself.
Oh no, you just muted yourself. Unmute yourself. It's that button right in the middle. Oh my. Okay, just move around till you find it. Did you find it? No, you're still muted.
Can Woody run in and help him?
I know, right? Okay, how you doing there, Trustee Todd? Just,
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Yeah.
you are muted
Okay.
now. There you go. I know it's sticky. There you go.
Okay. So first off, full disclosure, in my day work, I've actually volunteered for Essential Services Worker Day Camp in Abbotsford. So I am a little bit aware of what's going on at the ground level. And I think the biggest thing, we talk about care, we talk about connection, but I do know that there's a fair amount of concern out there. And I know your theme of connection is woven throughout our response at this time, and I'm very well aware of that. But that concern tends to, it's the ocean of concern. It washes over everything else. And I know one of my sayings that I picked up from you, Superintendent Stewart, is that as fast as you can and as slow as you need to. And I think that right now we're basically we're doing so many decisions in such a short period of time. The exhaustion sets in, and I'm concerned for the DLT. I'm also concerned for everything. Basically what I want to boil it down to, two things. Reaching out, what words of reassurance can you offer to the reticent student, the reticent parent, and also the reticent employees that are out there?
Word.
All right, so Superintendent, I will send you live here.
There you go.
You are unmuted.
So thank you for your question, Trustee Todd. And so, yeah, one of my goals has been to try to kind of keep calm amongst the storm here. And I want to make sure that I don't trivialize people's concerns, because I think, people validly, they're worried about their children. We've got staff that are worried, and we've been a province that have, for the last 2 months have said, by all, whatever you do, isolate, stay apart. So you're having people right now feel like they're working through a mixed message. And so what I'm offering them is to say, hey, look at that. We're going to do the very best we can to meet those health and safety guidelines. To our Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, we are lucky to have the staff that we do to put that in place. But I do think I want to urge folks that you don't have to get your children out there. We know some have no choice. You're an essential service worker. You've got to have a place for your kids, or you can't get to work. We get it. If you're vulnerable, we get it. But there are many folks that have said, the remote learning, my child's in a good place. I am someone right now that does not require any additional assistance. And if you're in that case, don't feel like you need to. Because that is not something you have to necessarily go after at this point. So what I'm trying to focus most on is where someone says, I'm thinking of those high school students. How many times you've heard around math? Oh my goodness. When it comes to math in high school, I could use some one-on-one. Well, by all means, get in. You might only need that hour or two, but you don't have to hang out all day. You know what? Get what you need. So if we can, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, do the best we can as a school system to address those that most need that help, fantastic. This isn't just an exercise in just connecting together socially. That wasn't the purpose of it. But I would want to assure folks that we will have the safeguards in place, and we will set up the structures necessary, because of the great people we have, to make sure that when that child comes to school, that they will be in a caring, safe environment. And like you, I worried. I thought, I just had this vision of this poor kindergarten student walking with their mom and lining up and, keeping the distancing, and then being, sent towards the door with someone in a mask and gloves. That visual scares me, to be honest with you. And that's not something we're looking at here. our administrators and staff are going to do the best they can to make sure that we have those caring climates that still are there, because what the culture is like within a building and how you feel as you enter it is really critical. So how do you meet that balance with, quite frankly, some very tight health restrictions that we need to meet? So we'll continue to, I guess, keep people up to date in terms of communication and learn, because again, like I said, what it's going to look like Monday and a week later could be two different things, and appreciate the parents working alongside us with that. So that's right now what I would put out as my message for reassurance.
Great, thank you.
Megan, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, the button, I tried to hit it twice. It just didn't unmute. Trustee Ross, you are now live.
Thank you very much. Superintendent, a question for you regarding the checklist. I think that's a really good idea to have a checklist. I would really think that would allay a lot of fears if people could see the detail that the district is going through to protect students and staff. Is there a chance that we could get a copy of those checklists?
Okay, let's go here. So I don't think I'm unmuted.
You are unmuted. You are now going live.
All right. So yes, we can look at that. I think what we're trying to do for parents too is we will be posting the guidelines and checklists on our website. So that's certainly Joel, make sure she does that. Barry's working with schools, not only for staff to be aware, but how do you have parents be aware of this too? Because again, to the point that links to Trustee Todd, that gives you that reassurance piece, because when people see how daunting the amount of stuff is you have to consider, to your point, that could be very helpful. So yeah, we can get that out to you all, make a note of that.
Good. And I'm so pleased it's going to be on the website for parents to review and staff as well. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you, Trustee Ross. Next on the speakers list is Trustee Coburn. I'm just going to send her live. You're officially live. There we go.
Exciting. Thank you, Chair, and through the chair to the superintendent. Thank you for your work, your good work, and the work of your team. So I think the issue isn't so much with people's fear, isn't so much with the competency of the staff or the people in our district. I think the issue people are having is with reality, and rightfully so. Because we've been told, like you said, you've pointed to the mixed message, this is very dangerous, we need 6 feet apart, blah, blah, blah. We're sending kids back. So I think any parent who's struggling with this isn't really having some kind of irrational fear. They're having a little bit of a dance with reality, because you imagine kids, and I heard something come up twice, kids in control. We're going to control the kids. I'm like, really, good luck. And then the other one is that we have all these policies in place, and the bus drivers, that's great. I love policy. Kids don't care about policy. So this leads me to my question, PPE and tracking. So I know that when you go to a restaurant now, you have to give at least one name of the party, of the people in your party, and you give information. That way, if somebody contracts COVID or somebody in the restaurant, whatever, everybody can be notified. And I find it really interesting that there's that great level of care and detail going into, say, going to a pub. So I'm just wondering what the ministry has set out in terms of tracking people. So who's in where, what day, and then how we go about notifying them if somebody becomes infected, right? Because now you're looking at families, you're looking at kids who go to work and then they come to school. So you're basically taking everything that we've done in the last 8 weeks and undoing it by throwing a bunch of kids in a school. But I don't have much of an opinion on that. So I'm just wondering what the expectation is, 6 feet apart, PPE, where is it coming from? How much is there? And how are we going to be tracking our kids to make sure that everybody who's come into contact with each other at every site can be notified should there be a contagion? No big thing.
All right, thank you, Trustee Coburn. I'm just going to go over to the superintendent.
Are we unmuted?
You are unmuted, and you're also live.
This has been just so much fun. So on to the point of your questions, a good question. So first of all, in terms of little children, I think it's completely unrealistic to think that they're going to stay apart the entire time. That's not going to happen. We'll do our best to encourage, and I think I'll give credit to our parents. I think they've done a lot of, work with their children to be mindful of these things. They're little kids, so we're trying to tell people, remember that, and certainly give good guidance. But at the end of the day, some of this is going to go on. To your point, so I totally hear what you're saying. In terms of the PPE, we've been all that the ministry has told us at this point. If people would like to wear it, they can. It's simply a choice. It's not something districts provide. It's something if you wish to have it, then away you go. So we've got. Could we see parents with these on staff, kids, possibly? I'll be honest with you. I'll wait to see what happens with June. In terms of first aid rooms, they will have access to this equipment, and I think there will be also access, but I'd have to defer to Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan on this. In terms of, I know that there's some with roles with some of our diverse abilities folks or children, that whether they will be, if they would like to have wear one of these, some of them may. But again, just right now provincially, there's nothing saying that schools will be providing or districts are providing these. The tracking piece, there is attendance taken every day at secondary and elementary. They're working that into the MyEd BC piece. Part of that is they'd like to know who's actually showing up. But to your point, they'll know on any given day who was at least in the building. If there should be something that emerges during the day, that child or staff member is isolated until they can get home. And in the meantime, we contact Fraser Health. We take our direction from Fraser Health. And they would walk us through to say, okay, first of all, let's see if the person does really have the virus. And if they do, they're going to say right away, that's why you have to make sure you know who's in your building at any given time. But I don't know, Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, if you have any other comments on either PPE, you've become the expert in all of British Columbia on this, or you have any comments on that tracking piece. But that's my understanding of those two roles.
Okay, thank you. So over to Assistant Superintendent Bunyan, and then Trustee Coburn has a follow-up.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, you're unmuted.
Good, I'll just add a few things really quick on the topic of PPE. We take all of our guidance from Fraser Health, the BC Centre for Disease Control, the Ministry of Education, all of which right now say it is not required. At this point, and that's mostly, and I'll get back to the word control. I know Trustee Coburn, you mentioned that word. What I was referring to and what I meant was that is around, we're able to do a really, thorough job about who comes in the building and who doesn't, as opposed to maybe controlling people's behavior. That wasn't what I was meaning. And because we can do that, they feel it's unnecessary to go beyond, but people can bring their own masks if they choose to, and we have told all of our staff that they can do that, because sometimes that provides a level of comfort for them personally. On the issue of tracking, I believe, if I understood your question correctly, part of your question was, well, who's going to contact people if someone is confirmed of having the virus, that kind of thing. The health checks are not about confirming the virus. It's simply about confirming that there are symptoms or something. Of course, we don't have that kind of testing to confirm. Fraser Health does that. And we've had this conversation with them repeatedly. They are very clear that they are the ones who do the contacting. And if they want us to be involved in that process, they advise us and they tell us. And so they may not ask us to do anything, because whatever they need to do, they may have all the resources to do that. Or they may ask us for attendance lists if they require it. But we completely take our guidance from them on who gets contacted, how they get contacted. So I hope that helps.
Off, sorry.
You're muted.
All right, there we go. Thank you. All right, now I appreciate your comments, Assistant Superintendent. I'm going to now send Trustee Coburn back. Right, there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that. I appreciate your clarification, but so I just want to be clear that my concerns aren't with our district and with our people and with our policy. My concern is with the mixed messaging of a government who is telling people to, keep this know who you've come into contact with. When you go into a restaurant, you have to leave your name. So the government is very interested in tracking cases, and whoever contacts these people is not my concern. I'm just really interested that there doesn't seem to be that same level of care in our public system. And that's not at a district level, that's at a ministerial level. And so I find it very strange that we're not being directed to wear personal protective equipment, not to make us feel better, but to stop the contagion and the spread of a virus that we've been told we need to flatten a curve on. So I don't think it's about fear. I think it's about what we've been told, which is when you cough, cover your mouth. The contagion rate of this is 4 times the flu. Cover your mouth all the time. Go to school, send your kids. And this is my question for you through the chair to the superintendent. It's your opinion, which is really valuable. So when you look at the research on the second wave, it's not in the original outbreak, it's in a different city in China, but what they're finding is that the children, especially now, are far more contagious than we used to believe, and the transmission between child to child is extremely high. Also, children are a silent carrier, and they're also finding that people are highly contagious for 3 weeks usually before they show a symptom. So for you, Superintendent, how do you feel about that? Given that this is, no, but seriously, this is coming out of not just BC, this is coming out of health organizations, this is coming out of China, this is coming out of everywhere. The second wave that's hit outside of Wuhan is showing that it is very targeted to children. Ontario has closed down their public schools. They said, no way, other provinces are doing it. I'm wondering why in BC, our rate of contagion doesn't seem to be impacting our kids the same as it is around the rest of the world. Good luck.
Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
So,
All right, I'll just send you live here. Superintendent, where did you go? You must be
right here.
You're somehow at the bottom of the page now. Just a second.
Oh, you know what? I can do this.
Yeah, your camera
Well,
is off. That's
hello,
why.
everybody. Thank you for your complex, challenging question, Trustee Coburn. I can always count on you. Yeah, you know what? This is way beyond my, expertise. I've heard, certainly like everybody, could there be a second wave? What's that like? How is this thing mutating? Because that's another side of it. No matter what they come up with for a virus, will it be able to address all different strains of this? Well, I definitely respect Bonnie Henry. She's a wonderful role model, and I'm certainly deferring to her expertise. What we've been told, and I can only give you what we've been told, is that where there has been an impact in terms of children, it has been more in densely populated areas where there is a significant outbreak, and they refer to New York City as an example of that. And some of the places, when that's been the case, they've said certainly children can be at risk, which we may have seen in China. I can't speak to the case you've mentioned. But in terms of BC, because they feel those qualities are not currently in place, that's why she is guiding us. But on this one, to say, yes, we're safe to proceed now. However, she always puts an asterisk of, that doesn't mean that this couldn't change. And come September or October, November, we have to respond to it. So I think there's still plenty for us to learn here. I think we're going to have to be very nimble and flexible in terms of how we respond. And in the meantime, I'm going to have to trust the public health authorities with the information they're giving. I'm saying you're the expert, and if you're doing that, then my role then will be the best I can put in place for our kids. But thank you for it's a good one, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'm like you, watching how this is going to unfold in the days ahead, and I understand the nervousness out there. I totally get it. I mean, I totally understand it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Next speaker on the list is Trustee Wilson, and then I have a second question from Trustee Perot. And I just want to remind trustees we do have another item on the agenda, and we still have to get through. And I know that summer session will yield a lot of questions as we're rolling to 10 p.m., which I know our staff still have to get up tomorrow. So let me just maybe never sleep. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to send Trustee Wilson live. You are unmuted, Trustee Wilson, and you are going live.
Great, thank you. First, just a couple quick comments. I want to applaud Woody for his quick action in getting to you, Gord. I'm glad I'm not the only one that needs someone to rush in the room for me. And I also just want to say I do have a couple quick comments and then a couple quick questions, probably for Assistant Superintendent Bunyan. So my quick comments are, I am so excited that we have day custodians in all of our schools right now. I don't even care that it took a pandemic to do this. I am just like so appreciative. I've wanted this forever, so thank goodness for that. Thank you to the district for making that happen, and I'm so glad to hear about how clean everything is. I'm shocked about the PPE. Wow, for our most vulnerable students or students who are immunocompromised, I'm not sure how we aren't going to have staff wearing PPE and not supplying that PPE for them. So I've heard that we haven't been supplied with any, and that's really disappointing, and I hope that we can maybe change that. So my couple quick questions are then, safety plans. We looked at the outline for how they're going to look, and it said they will be distributed to all involved. So is that staff, all staff, or is it staff and families, or is it everybody? And then who is doing the daily health checks? Because that also is going to take some staff to do. And then lastly, are we making accommodations for staff who have immune compromised or health concerns? Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Send the superintendent live here. You are unmuted, Superintendent.
Yes, so I will call on Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, because to Trustee Wilson's points, certainly this has been well within the domain of the Assistant Superintendent there. So Barry, are you able to speak to those?
Yes, although I just realized I probably should have written down all three. So if I forget one, please remind me. Or put it in the chat maybe. First, with the safety plans are communicated to staff probably through email and through posting in the staff room after they're confirmed by the Joint Health and Safety Committee. Information will go home to parents as well. We've debated about whether or not the entire safety plan would go home to parents, because sometimes a daunting list of 4 pages of items can cause more confusion than it solves. So we're still working on whether a summarized list will go home or how that will work. However, the district guidelines and the district plan are on the website for everybody to see. So one way or the other, they'll get that. I believe your last question was about accommodations. And I think you specifically referenced immunocompromised people. So what we are doing with all of our staff, all of our employee groups, is we are working through with people, everybody who says that they have barriers to coming into the building. HR department has been working on that with them for weeks. Anybody who has a barrier to come in and like if they have an immune compromised disease and there's something that we can verify from a physician that coming in is a problem for them, because it may or may not be, depending on the severity or what the individual has, that will be accommodated. We're looking at accommodations for people for age reasons, possibly, for having aged parents at home, possibly. All of these things are being explored with every employee, and currently we are still working through all of that. So, and I apologize, I think you had a question in the middle there, I'm sorry.
It was about who does the health checks.
Oh, thank you very much. The health checks will be done by the teachers and the principal. The principal has the responsibility that it's done in the school, but you can imagine if you have 100 kids or 150 kids all coming in through one door, as we're trying to do a health check with everyone every day, it could take an hour or so to get them into the building. So our current plan is, and again, this is a very elementary focused plan, but it'll take a similar look at the high schools, is the children will come to the classroom door that's designated for them. When they come in, the teacher will ask them the questions, and that way multiple groups can be entering simultaneously into different rooms. Everyone will ask the same questions. It's standard. They'll be provided for people. And then part of the procedures is if someone answers yes to any of the questions, have you been outside of Canada? Have you have flu-like symptoms, those things. And we'll obviously be asking parents for the really little ones. Then they'll be asked to go home, or if they were developed it during the day for some reason, we have procedures to put them in a separate room, call parents, things like that. So it is going to be the principals and the teachers that will do this work together, only because we got to get people into the building in a timely way.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for those questions. I have one follow-up from Trustee Coburn, but just before I go to her, I just wanted to mention that all of the health and safety documents are on the website as of today, and they will be included in the plan, which goes out to families tomorrow. So I'm going to just send Trustee Coburn live. You are muted, Trustee Coburn, just so you know. And there we go. You are now unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman, for letting me follow up here. This one's a little, again, it's revisiting something I asked about last month. So to the superintendent, you mentioned that this is optional and you don't have to send your kid back, right? And, you know, if your kid's doing fine, if your kid's whatever. And what it does is it kind of creates a culture of, what about my kid? Now my kid's going to fall behind, because there's a couple of groups of kids that really do need, and families, right? I get that. And then there's the grade 12 kids, and they're a rare bunch. They're going to miss out on their grads. At LSS, you got to choose one parent, and that was it, right? Like, it's a tough year on these grade 12s. Now what's happening to them? Their mental wellness is really important. And because they can't learn, say, calculus, let's go calculus, online, the same as in person, their grades are plummeting. And this is impacting their scholarships. This is impacting their university possibilities. There are many provinces in this country that are not assigning grades to grade 12 students. There will be no grade on your transcript. Now, when I asked about this last time, Gord, you had said, yes, the ministry's kicked this around and they've gotten rid of it. And I really, really wish they would reconsider, because, again, other provinces, they're basically saying, listen, like, we're the Ministry of Advanced Education and we're the Ministry of Public Education, so we're going to be able to figure this out. Because the undue stress that it is causing on 17 and 18-year-old kids is not healthy. And so I'm just hoping that maybe as a board we could have a little discussion, or perhaps motion, and I know people don't like surprises, but I would really like us to consider writing a letter to the Minister of Education, to the Ministry of Advanced Education, to BCSTA, to urge them to reconsider this, or to maybe even look at what other provinces are doing, look at how they can change this, because I don't think that grade 12 students should be penalized for a pandemic in terms of scholarship and entry. So to the superintendent and to the rest of my board, your thoughts on that would be really appreciated.
So just before we go over Trustee Coburn, because that's a very important question and point. As you know, I emailed out this week, we have a conference call on Friday, all board chairs with the ministry, and that conference call is giving us the opportunity to ask questions, raise concerns with the ministry of the return to work plan and how the remainder, or return to school plan, and how the remainder of the school year will look. And I'm wondering if the appropriate place to have the initial conversation would be on that conference call on Friday. And as you know, I asked every trustee to please send me everything that they would like me to communicate in that call. And those concerns and questions will be sent the Thursday before the call is the cutoff. And then what I could do is come back to the board with the full report on the reaction to that. And then from there, we have another board meeting quite quickly after that. Then we would then have your, our live, okay, good, we're live again. Your motion then could address whatever we have that's like more drilled down from the reaction. So let me just send you back live so you can speak to that. I just wanted to put that out there before we, because we can see what the other boards are saying too to that. You're live now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and so fair enough. I didn't send it is a question because we'd already kind of talked about it, and it was my understanding that the ministry said no. So yes, you bring it up, and depending on what they say, I just think that if they come back with no, we're not doing this, that it would be my big, I will bring it forward as some kind of motion that the Board of Education is, and people can support it or not. I just think that it's really, in terms of a parent of a grade 12 student, it's probably. I know that it's very devastating for grade 12 this year, not just me, but the rest of the parents and the teachers. And I think the least that we can do for them is to make sure that the rest of their future going forward isn't negatively impacted because our ministry couldn't figure out how to give not assign a grade when the rest of the country is doing it. So thank you.
And thank you for that, for sure. So as always, as soon as that call concludes, I'll get something back out to the board, and then we can look at what the next steps would be depending on their response on that call. But I am going to send the superintendent live from that, and then I will close out just with 2 quick comments I have, and then we'll be going through and receiving this update. So let me send the superintendent live if you have anything to add to that, superintendent. And okay, you're live, but you need to unmute yourself.
No, I like the course of action because it's a provincial matter. You can't do this locally. And so what I didn't want is simply kids to quit. And I didn't want our staff simply to not do anything for kids. It's over. Like, good luck and leave it at that. So there is that tension. There's a tension for kids that have worked very hard, that had an A, that want some way to also be able to maintain that because they want to go to Harvard or UBC or wherever they wish to go, versus students as I just want to get by. And I was maybe I was at 40 or 50%, and this has been a setback because obviously it's not the type of learning that I can connect with. We are trying to. The other thing too is I think people need to remember is that the 1 day is a minimum for the students. It's not in terms of they can access more if they need to. So would I be reaching out to someone who is in jeopardy of saying, you know what, I'm hovering. I don't know if I'm going to get through, and I really need this course. They're the exact student I'm hoping will be able to access, since we're building tons of flexibility into it, so we can get them through. I trust teacher discretion. I think they know our kids better than the district level. They, our SEAs, our resource teachers, our teachers or administrators, school-based teams, they often work through and say, in this case, this is what we got to look at. And that's always been done. And I know those structures will still continue. And again, you know what, I think you don't want our kids penalized if we did something like that, and now it jeopardizes anyone that had aspirations to do X can't. So I think it's a valid question to raise, because I think as trustees provincially that should be wrestled with, and then see where it goes. And I can assure you that our district, we're staying the course. Then over this next month, we're going to continue to reach out to those kids and say, hey, if there's a will, there's a way. Let's do it. And there will be a lot of support still on that. So, but it's a great question. And yeah, for the grads, it is not. I said that in my grad video piece to them. This is a disappointment for many of them on many fronts. But that I won't let it define them. I won't let it be their legacy, and I'll continue to do what I can to support them.
All right, thank you very much. I think that concludes this. It does conclude the speakers list, at least on my end. If anybody was missed, please let me know. And thank you for all the excellent questions in the report. This has been such a challenge for everyone to navigate, and I know that everyone in our district has worked so hard, and I'd like to thank Gorgio and your team for the hours you've put in, for the way that you have approached this with such empathy for the challenges that every single one of our students and families are experiencing. The challenges that our students and families are experiencing. This is a situation where we have, for obvious reasons, not to diminish it, we have a culture of fear and concern, and that's expected as we return to how things will be as we navigate the next several months, perhaps years of this pandemic, and ensuring that everybody is safe and healthy. So thank you for everything that your team's done, and for keeping this board so up to date with such thorough reports. It's greatly appreciated, and I know you've put in, along with everyone, so much work and we're very grateful for the way you've professionally and with empathy approached this. So thank you. All right, so with that, we do need a motion that the Board of Education receives the update on COVID-19 for information as presented. I've got Trustee Wilson's moved and Trustee Todd has seconded. I do not have any other speakers on the list. So once again, I'll be calling for negative voting. So all those in favor of receiving it and anybody opposed, please put it in the chat. I do not see any opposition. I'll call one more time. Any opposition? Seeing none, motion is carried. We are now on, and I will send the superintendent live in just a second, to the summer session 2020 update. I'm going to send you live as superintendent.
And we're good?
You're
muted, but I'm not. All right.
We're going.
We're going.
It's 10 o'clock.
So last but not least, in terms of summer session, I've really appreciated the work we've done the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, we're probably one of the strongest summer session programs in the province. So in terms of what we've been able to offer kids, obviously a setback this year with all the circumstance we've just mentioned. It's going to look different, but we are going to, through the great work of District Principal Ron Stair, who works at Langley Education Center, but also the summer programming. And this has been one that, full kudos to him. He's really taken a great vision here in terms of moving forward with this. And despite the conditions we're in, we're going to still find a way to serve kids grade 10, 11, 12 with something this year. And again, some of our real students that, again, are certainly falling behind or vulnerable, and certainly at that kind of grade 1 to grade 5 level in particular. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron to be able to walk us through what you can expect to see for this summer.
Thanks, Gord. Just confirming you can all hear me.
You're good, Ron.
Yes, we can hear you.
So yeah, no small task after hearing about our budget and then the COVID update, then to follow up. So I'll try not to keep you long tonight, but also give you the information you need so that you have a sense for what summer session is going to look like this year. And thanks for the introduction, Gord. And just looking forward to sharing with you all as trustees so you get a sense for what we are able to do. So next slide, please, Woody. You're all very familiar with our district vision and mission, obviously, but I put this up here just as a reminder because this is something that we are very cognizant of in summer session, that summer is an extension of the learning opportunities for our students. The interesting part I'm interested in this year is that bottom left one, that learning taking place through flexible and connected environments, because really throughout the pandemic, since the March 17th announcement, as a district, we've been really working hard to try and figure out how to stay connected and also provide flexible learning, and we're going to continue to do that in the summer. Next slide, please, Woody. So obviously the term unprecedented has been used multiple times throughout the media and even in this meeting. I know this is my 10th year running summer session. Never would have anticipated to have to make the kind of choices we made to cut back on programs, but obviously that's the situation we're in. And next point, please, Woody. The entire system obviously has already been shared. We're moving to stage 3 on June the 1st. So all of the discussions we've had at summer session are focused around the provincial guidelines. But we have had to make some significant changes, and the goal of the next few slides is just to give you the extent of what changes we made moving ahead here. Yeah, if you click one more time, please, Woody. Thank you. So the piece about not doing everything and feeling all right with that is I'm in my mindset, I'm more interested in right now what I can do, not so much in what I can't do, and being able to just rest in the fact that we're doing the best we can. And then next click, please, Woody. So we can't do everything, but we can do something, and that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get most of opportunities. So in the next couple of slides here, we're going to show you the some things we are able to do for summer session. I'm going to start in the lower grades, and as mentioned, because we have limited ability to do as much as we'd normally like to do, we are focusing on the English literacy for students grade level 1 to 3. As a district and as a province, we know that that's a critical area for long-term student success as they move from primary to intermediate. If they're behind grade level, that impacts not just their success at intermediate, but even their graduation rates. So that's actually been a long-term goal of the district. The literacy was one of the first things we started to look at when we expanded summer session. So we're going to fall back to that as one of our primary areas of focus. One of the differences this year, for the first time, it'll be, well, first time in my tenure anyways, it'll be by referral only. This is not an open registration like we've had in other times when we've got the wide breadth of opportunities from grade 1 up to middle school. Then we have open registration. For these ones, it'll be by referral only, and we're working with the elementary principals on a process around that, and so they can identify the most vulnerable students in their communities. This will also include, it doesn't specifically mention the ELL learners, but it will also include the ELL learners. And going back to even the Karen Beatty days when she was our coordinator for the languages, we talked about the fact that at the lower levels of primary, students can fully integrate with some of the other language learning and literacy when they're at the primary levels in particular. And then if we get a big enough cohort of ELL learners, then we could have a specific class. But we also feel really comfortable with the fact that we can incorporate the ELL learners into what we're able to do in the regular literacy classes, grade 1 to 3. And by the way, I mentioned level 1 to 3 because if we have a student who's not reading at grade level and maybe they're in grade 4 and they're in that grade level 1 to 3 level, then they would also qualify for this program. And as I mentioned, the schools will have the ability to identify the most vulnerable students within their population. The classes will be running from July 6th to 24th, which was our original timeline as well. And they will be having smaller class sizes than what we would traditionally have, and will be in order to meet the district health and safety protocols. So instead of the typical 9 regional sites we have for elementary and middle, we're down to 5 sites, and the sites are listed there. We've tried to make sure that we follow our sort of guiding principle of making the sites regionally available across the Langley region. So everything from Aldergrove, Brookswood, the Slope area, Langley City, we've tried to cover as many areas as we can to not exclude the vulnerable students. Next slide, please, Woody. So the other thing we're focusing on is secondary grade 10 to 12 full credit. We're calling it, we're calling it blended summer learning because this year it is a blend of Moodle, which if you're not familiar with that is an online learning platform. We're going to be using Teams, which has been fully incorporated since the March 17th announcement across the district. So Moodle will be the ability for students to have the content available to them 24/7 on a website. The content they have available is what's provincially authorized, and we were part of a consortium, the Western Canadian Learning Network, and so all of the content that's in our Moodle access point is BC curriculum. It's not outside curriculum. Then the Teams will be the ability for students to log in twice a week and actually work with their teacher and have the opportunity for the teacher to share information. And then they also have the opportunity for in-person learning at RE Mountain Secondary. And if you can click on the next slide, please, Woody. So the in-person support times are voluntary because as you've already identified in the previous discussion you've been having, some parents are very comfortable with their students coming in person, other parents are not. And also because we're only going to be at one site this year for the in-person part, we didn't want to exclude anybody who's not able to get there for various reasons for transportation. So a student could fully do the whole class that we're doing in this blended summer model without having to go to RE Mountain. But we also know that if we can have the students come in and they need that extra help, they're likely to be more successful. I will mention with the registration piece, it did open yesterday for current Langley students, and it will open on June 8th for out-of-district students. I'm not positive yet, but right now we're already at over 425 registrations for the first 2 days in this program. So I don't know if there will be any spots for the June 8th for out-of-district. We're having to monitor to make sure that we can keep within class size for the COVID situation. Yeah, so the other things we're focusing on is the grade 9 remedial math. And again, for the same reason that literacy is important at the primary level, we know that math at the grade 8 and 9 level, and particularly grade 9 as they get ready for math 10 is critical, and it's a marker for future graduation success. Next bullet, please, Woody. And this will again be by referral only from the home school. It's not an open registration process. It will be 3 weeks from July 6th to 24th. And again, at RE Mountain. And then again, if the student's not able to come in person, they don't have to. They can do it virtually, but we think we'll have more success if they are able to come in for some small group sessions. And then the final something is the Youth at Risk Transitions programs. For any of you who have been part of a presentation with us before for summer, you know that these programs are geared specifically for students that would maybe struggle making the transition from their current elementary or middle school into a secondary site. And these are site-specific programs. Next bullet, please, Woody. And then this, so it's still under consideration. And the reason for that is we've been behind the 8 ball trying to wait to see what our possibilities were for summer. Our first priority was to get the enrollment out for the secondary full credit and also the elementary, which we're working on. And then the next thing in the middle of everything else we're doing is rolling it out to the schools for the at-risk. And I guess I'm into cliches today, but to me, this is really that our story is going to be different than what we'd imagined. We had big plans for this summer. We've had to pivot like the rest of the system right now, but we still think that summer session can be a good opportunity to support our students in Langley. So that's it for me. I'm glad to obviously answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your report. I greatly appreciate it, and for all the hard work that's been put into creating a great summer session under the circumstances. I do have one speaker on the list. If there are other trustees that would like to be added to the list, please let me know in the chat. I'm going to send Vice Chair Todd live. All right, so let me go there. You're just spinning in the blue circle. There you go. Trustee Todd, you're live now. You need to unmute yourself. It's a center button. It has a microphone. Just hit that button. How you doing? Hit one more time. Oh no. Is it not unmuting? No, okay. Do you want to put your question in the chat and I'll read it? Could you do that? I'll send myself live. I think I'm sending, there we go. We are all, oh, the event's paused too. Okay, hello, sorry. We are all navigating our new technology and we are often not as resilient as the students we teach in this area. So thank you to everybody for your patience. Trustee Todd is typing out his question, which I will read and have directed to the appropriate person. Trustee Todd, are you having any luck? He's typing. So,
his mic now should
his mic's back. Okay, I'm going to send him live.
Okay. Am I good?
I promise you're good.
Okay. So one, I really wanted to thank you, Ron, for doing all this work. I know that the passion, the commitment you bring to summer session every year is exemplary. And I know this year it's scaled back a little bit. I really appreciate your approach this year, rather than just do nothing, do something, and the fact that you're targeting 2 specific groups. And I want to maybe ask some of the questions around your synthesis, the early literacy intervention, and as well the grade 9 math. I know it's basically research based, but how did you come up with those specific ideas to work on?
Yeah, great question. It's basically a team approach. Mal Gill, our assistant superintendent, is the assistant superintendent I work directly with on this. So working with him, we also have a very strong team of administrators that come on board to run the programs. And we also get feedback within the field. So it wasn't just a me decision. Mal and I, and then various people have had input, and then we've had to look at what we can do this year. And so the things that we're taking on, we feel like we wanted to do what we could well and not try and take on too many things. So we think we can do the literacy well, we can do the numeracy for the really targeted students, and also the academic 10 to 12. The 10 to 12 is one that as I went through, I meant to mention it's actually a model we might actually look at as a parallel model moving ahead in future years. Other districts run their full face-to-face 5-day-a-week summer session like we do with great success, because if you can see students face-to-face, obviously it's a better model when we can. But actually, even outside of COVID times, a couple of districts, in particular Coquitlam, has had great success They had 250 students do a similar model with a mix of twice a week face-to-face and they're 3 times a week in the Moodle platform. And of those 250 students, my understanding from talking to the principal is only about 10 students didn't actually complete their coursework. And it just gives them a lot of flexibility. So some of the things we're doing this year will actually set us up for future. But back to your original point about the decision, yeah, it's going back to the discussions we've had over the years. And at the end of the day, everything we do in summer session we think is valuable for students, where else we wouldn't be doing it. But the reason we went to the model to support the 8 and 9 math going back a number of years is because that was a key point that the high schools had identified as a barrier. And then again, the literacy going back based on the research and also the feedback is just, we know that if we don't intervene early with the literacy, it has huge implications for them. So it became sort of an actually easy decision in some ways because those are the most vulnerable educationally students for future success.
All right, thank you very much. The last speaker on the speakers list that I have is Trustee Ward. I'm just going to send him through and then we will get a motion. I promise you are unmuted.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I know it's been a long night. I just want to say thank you, Ron. I think you're doing a fantastic job. This is, we always talk about tough conversations, and along with that comes prioritization. So you have to kind of weed out and do this kind of hyper analytical or this analysis to figure out what can you do well. So I think that's actually really good for modeling for our students and for us as anybody as you're trying to navigate this crisis is, what should we focus on and what can we discard? And those are tough decisions, but anyhow, I think you've modeled it quite well. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Ward. All right, sending myself back out live. There we go. Our video's lagging a bit, but I'll catch up. There we go. So thank you very much once again for that report and for all the work that has gone into this. At this point, we will need a motion that the Board of Education receives the report on summer session 2020 for information as presented. Could I please get, it's already in there. I've got a mover with Vice Chair Todd and a seconder with Trustee Ross. And once again, we'll be voting in the negative. So if you would like to be opposed, please put it in the comments. All those in favor of receiving the report. I do not see any negatives. Any opposition? Second time, any opposition? Seeing none, the motion is carried. All right, so that concludes the business on the agenda. I do not see any new business. New business. All right, so now we're going to go to trustee comments, and I will start with my screen in the top left, which is Trustee Wilson, followed by Trustee Todd, followed by Trustee Perot, followed by Trustee Ross, followed by Trustee Ward, followed by Trustee Coburn, and then myself. So we will have Trustee Wilson go first. I am sending you live. And you are live.
Great. Okay, so what a long meeting this has been. So I did have a few things to say, but I'll try to make them quick. First of all, I surely would have liked if the ministry had consulted with boards before making the decision to reopen schools on June 1st. I can see how much unnecessary stress that decision has put on families and staff. And I can't reiterate what our superintendent and I think all of us have been saying all night, and I've been saying it all over the place as much as I can. You don't need to send your child to school. If they need to, then absolutely. But if they don't, then please don't feel you're missing out or they're missing out. If they're doing fine at home, keep them at home. It's all good. They're not going to get behind on anything. So I really wish we would have had some consultation on this, because I think we probably all would have maybe thought a little bit more about it. I would also like to recognize the documentary Skids that was filmed here in Langley School District. As a board, we must celebrate its success, and I hear it's been nominated for several awards, so that's awesome. The Langley Human Dignity Coalition. I sit on that committee, and we have an initiative for Seniors Week next week. I'm excited to see all of the lovely art and messages that the youth have been creating for our seniors. If you don't know about it and you have kids that can create something, please go to the school district website for more information. And unfortunately, I'm going to end off on a sad note, give my deepest condolences to Captain Jennifer Casey of the Royal Canadian Air Force's Snowbirds. Our hearts go out to all of her family and fellow snowbirds. That's all from me. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson, and thank you for the important points you highlighted tonight. The board greatly appreciates it. All right, so off to Vice Chair Todd's next on comments.
So, interesting times. I want to start off by speaking to the parents, and I'm not sure how many parents are out there. Some parents in discussions with their own children will decide not to send their kids back to school, and that's okay. Some parents, whether essential services workers or they're parents of vulnerable students or students with special needs, will choose to send their kids back to school out of necessity, and that's okay. Some parents will decide that their students are doing okay with the blended or with the online reality, and that's okay. Some of our employees will need to have accommodations, and they will need to stay home. They may have immunocompromised systems, or they may be older than 60 years, or all those things that we know may lead to worrisome medical things, and that's okay. We need to be calm, and we need to show caring at this time. When there's all these things going on in a pandemic, we need to wipe away the chaos and wipe away the disruption and focus on what is most important, and that's the learning of our students and the care and love we give to each and every child in our district. Be calm, be kind, and be safe.
Thank you, Vice Chair Todd. I'm now going to Trustee Perot.
I kind of got lost in David's voice. I want to, again, I want to thank our community staff, our administrators, our support staff again for all the good work you guys have been doing and going around the clock. Again, that focus on community has been really profound. Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill and Kim Anderson running our hubs, thank you for the profound work you guys have been doing to get those going and doing such an exceptional job supporting our staff through those. I really enjoyed my opportunity visiting the hubs, and it was pretty amazing to watch what was going on and see the energy and the enthusiasm and the kind of care that was transpiring in there and how children were learning. It was pretty exciting, especially when we saw these little desks being personalized and what was happening for those who don't know what I'm talking about. The kids' desk got to have, and some of the hubs got to have the opportunity to decorate their own desks and completely personalize the whole thing. And a lot of them made these like little tents where they can go underneath their desk and just hide away for a while. And those kind of subtle pieces of care in that personalized learning becomes quite profound and creates an incredible safe place for kiddos to coexist together in times that are so foreign to every one of us. And you guys have led our teams so well through that. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you. I also thank you, Marnie, for bringing up SCIDS. That was really important. Vanguard's done a great work in this district, and that nomination is pretty important. So thank you for acknowledging that. And I want to thank our board, finally, outside of everybody else, because you guys also are a compassionate, empathetic, and brilliant group of people. Iron sharpens iron, and as we continue going through this season that has probably been, for some time, some of the most challenging journeys a board can interface with, it's been awesome to watch your minds at work and your hearts at work and hear your questions and concerns come forward and how we lift each other up through that discerning process. And it's a very invaluable part of what we do as a team to support our district and to support, most importantly, our students and how they can feel safe in the classroom. So I just want to acknowledge your good work and thank you for that as well.
Thank you. There's Trustee Ross. There he is. Okay. The boxes moved. So if I change the order, it's because the boxes have moved. And when that happens, I lose my flow of who's next. So I think I'm going to be able to keep it going in the right order. Trustee Ross, you're up.
Well, thank you. And thank you, board. And this is just a real shout out to our senior staff and all principals and seriously all teachers as well. Very challenging times, but you know what I always see is that these people are working all the time, and I'm not. I'm sitting at home, and I'm telling you the truth, I'm a little jealous. But I really think that this is a jealousy that's not correct. I think I should just be staying at home and letting you do the good work that you're doing, Gord. So keep it up. But my heart goes out to all of the staff and our principals. I mean, seriously, they're doing some amazing stuff out there. I had a chance to go to some of the hubs, and I was over at Walnut Grove recently, and I was in their library and seeing what they were doing in there, and it's always very impressive. But challenging times, but these people are stepping up to it, and I just want to say how proud I am of all of you guys. And somehow you've got to find a way to turn it off, Gord. So I don't know how you're going to do that, but when you figure it out, let us know. Take care.
Thank you, Trustee Ross. I now have Trustee Ward. I'm just sending live. You are muted, Trustee Ward.
Okay, so I know I didn't say a lot in the meeting here, but these are some of my notes here. So I'm going to see if I can take this array of thoughts and weave it in succinctly, which won't happen. But I do want to echo what some of the other trustees have said, just thanking our staff. And I know you hear it from time to time, all our senior leadership, Gord and Brian and the rest. But this is, and times like this, I mean, this is a time where your leadership really shines. And very thankful for that because you make us look good. I do want to echo what Trustee Perot said, just thanking the rest of the board members here. I think this is a time that we want to unify as best as we can as a family to some degree. And I think that is a good message, and I think I want to echo that. So some of the notes that I had here is, and I'm going to end off with a book recommendation because Trustee Ross does that, and I'm trying to follow your lead here, or maybe I shall say it right now. So in this time of kind of diversified learning experiences, perhaps like when kids are at home, it's nice to pick up other ways of kind of learning. And one that I did, I'm listening to audiobooks. I know I should be reading, but there's one that's actually really good with respect to memorization and learning. And hopefully I'll remember the title, but that's a joke. Make It Stick by Peter C. Brown. So that's an excellent book. At least Trustee Ross might listen to it because I know he's on Audible as well. A couple other comments. It's only going to be another 30 minutes. Don't worry. One I want to talk about is in this time when we're going through a lot of different things here, what I noticed is there's a common theme, and that is fine tuning. Like so with respect to our budget and summer school, and all these other things that are kind of coming up, we're having to adjust our course. We have to kind of learn, I think, be nimble. Was already said here. So one of them is like more precision, fine tuning our goals and our needs and what really matters. So I think this is actually I wouldn't want it again, but it's actually a good process because we can evaluate what really matters, and then we can rebuild from there. So it actually is tough. I want to thank Brian and his staff for doing such an excellent job on doing that, mining the gold from the depths of like what is really essential in the budget and what has to go. And it's really tough. But what else did I want to say? I've got to say a few more things. Just a few more things here. I do want to thank our partner groups and for the people who are actually watching. People are watching out there, you know, and this is a time to show unity. And I do want to thank the people who are watching. They're watching for trustee comments. So hopefully they're watching the whole show. But I do want to thank people out there in Facebook land, our partner groups, our DPAC and our PACs, and our parents. I do want to thank parents for learning how to adjust how they're going to engage this process. Some of them are acting as kind of liaisons or interim teacher aides to some degree, and they're doing a great job. So if you're out there and you're kind of a stand-in and you're trying to navigate this experience, thank you for stepping in and trying to figure this out. It's challenging for everybody, so everybody's got to bear a little bit of the load. I'm only going to say one more thing. I did want to say that Trustee Ross looks really dapper tonight. So, and got to finish. You do. You look really good tonight, and the blue shirts are in tonight. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ward. Trustee Coburn, I'm going to send you live now. You're muted.
I know. My teenager.
Sure, you know. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so are we live?
We have audio, but
Okay.
when it's send live, what it says is it says error. Failed to execute send live command, please try again. And then what the public is seeing is the live event will continue in a moment. So I don't know what the issue is.
Okay, well, I'll carry on because why should this meeting carry on? My trustee comments might be a little more organized than Trustee Ward's. So I would like to thank my colleagues who took a moment to acknowledge the documentary. So for me, I had it as something I'd like to mention. So the folks at Vanguard, congratulations. Gary Turner and Barbershop Films. Skids is a documentary that features youth, families, and educators in this district, and they've been nominated for several awards. The Rockies Awards for the Best Documentary, and 3 nominations at the Leo Awards, Best Program, Best Director, and Best Picture and Editing. So I would like to say that not only is this a beautiful film, it's beautifully shot, and it manages to share stories in a beautiful way. It demonstrates a tremendous amount of bravery. And so often adults will proclaim that we must work to eradicate stigma. Yet they often lack the courage to challenge the system that teaches us to be quiet. So thank you for sharing your story. I think that Langley is lucky for its people. They are second to none, and they are the best of the best. And so when I hear and read comments such as, we can only pay teachers to sit around at home for so long, receiving full pay before this province goes broke, I have to take some issue with that. This is just a comment in a paper or something. So I would like to say, the idea that people in public education haven't been working for or earning their pay is ludicrous. Overnight, their jobs have changed. They had to make and design their own content. It wasn't there, not created for them, just in case, you know, in case of pandemic, please break glass. They had to figure out which platform will work, which was likely what was available at a district level. And depending on the grade that they teach, they have to connect with each kid somehow in the midst of a global pandemic. Oh, wait, they are also teaching their own kids at the same time. Imagine teaching high school, 120 kids, you've got to connect, go. How about when you can't manage to connect with them and you know their story and now you're worried sick about them? I know that the vast majority, no matter how awful this is, are not giving up. They understand the value and what connection means. They also understand vulnerability, the visible ones and the invisible ones. I trust that the vast majority of our educators would have found ways to make this all work. But there has been no consultation, at least on my account, from the ministry. It has been directive after mixed message after another directive. It is wearing our people out. Stop it. Stop doing it to them. Let each district figure it out, and in conjunction with the community groups, because what ultimately is at issue here is daycares, an economy, and an utter lack of social support for families, not kids in need of learning. Let's attend to this, but don't call it business as usual, and don't send our kids in there. It's not quite the right time to be playing politics. This isn't a plan, and it certainly lacks vision. This is not about the district. This is at a ministerial level. Other provinces are doing it differently and better. Maybe it's time that our province looks to what these provinces are doing and considers doing it differently. There doesn't seem to be a plan for September. Other schools have a plan for the future. Why can't our government recognize that this year simply isn't worth it? And I make this statement largely because of a lack of planning, a lack of foresight, a lack of safety, a lack of protocol. This move isn't about anything other than an economy and an election and a test run. And I'm speaking as an individual, as a parent, as a taxpayer, and not as an entire board. As trustees, we have very limited capacity. And one of the things that we have to do is advocate for our people, because essentially they're bureaucrats and they're nonpartisan. I have heard the worn out voices of people that never wear out. Gord Stewart's signature move is energy. And when Gord Stewart is out of energy, there's no more energy in the room to be had. I can hear it in the Secretary Treasurer's voice. I can hear it in Mr. Stair's voice. I can hear it. I am worried about my people, our people, families, kids. So it is my job to stand up and say to our government and to our ministry that this is not on for me. And I really think that you can do better. And I think that the people in this province deserve better. Not just kids in our district. Our kids are going to be fine. How is that equitable? As a province, we deserve more. And I believe we can do better. And in the meantime, thank you, everyone. Be safe, and be smart, and be well.
Oh, God. Okay, I can't even do anything here.
You're muted.
We can hear you. No.
Okay, can you hear me? Vice Chair Todd? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so Megan did inform me that her thing is frozen right now. So at this time, we would move on to question period, but of course we know that that's online. I need a motion for adjournment. Okay, moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Perot. Meeting adjourned at 10:38 p.m. Thank you. Good night, all.
Good night. Trustee Ross, you do look good.